Once upon a time, a tree with a golden glow took root on Earth, and its name was Yggdrasil. In the blink of an eye, the tree grew to encompass everything and then created a new world based on different game genres. Thanks to Yggdrasil, an amazing world called the Labyrinth was created. But people called it the Game of God because not everyone could become a player in it. Ordinary workers working in the mines didn't even think about it. That day, the work was already finished, and the boss warned that no one would steal the equipment. He then approached the newcomer named 7017 and said that he had worked hard today. Therefore, the boss of 7017 even offered the guy to buy his goods at a cheap price. And then he handed him a data transmitter made from fake data. There was a chance that he would be discovered, but 7017 didn't even listen and walked away. This was the height of impudence for the boss, but it was stupid to be offended by the no-name. After all, he is as useless as the rest of them. However, the guy didn't think so, seeing huge glowing skyscrapers in front of him. However, this city had another side, poor and not the most pleasant. Beggars in the alleys asked for money and food. At 7017, I passed by and headed towards the random box store. He had not yet entered when he heard the screams of the indignant losers. It was like a gaming club where everyone hoped to win, but it didn't happen. The guy walked past the local gambling addicts and opened the door. He sat down with a machine that spit out everything that exists in this world. It was a random box that greeted an unknown player. Legal gambling attracts people who want to get rich quick, and today's knockout item was the right to create an SSR account. Next, the computer asked if the guy wanted to scroll to 10, and he clicked yes. This randomizer, being his only hope, started running. Boxes containing items began to fly out of the monitor, and the first box brought a toothbrush, an item of rank N. This did not suit the guy, and he continued to play, accumulating more and more rubbish. The boxes flew one after another, but everything was useless. He came across so many items of rank N. Suddenly, the light of the box changed, which means it is an R rank item. It would be nice to get an SR or SSR item, but he gets all the trash of low ranks. The guy couldn't remember how many times he had already tried this game. Each time he prayed for a rare object to fall out that would help save his sick mother. At that moment, he remembered her painful face. And then the screen lit up with a bright light that even my eyes hurt. The guy got up from his chair and backed away from the monitor. Did he finally get his hands on an SR item? He stared at the monitor because he couldn't believe it. After all, probably for the first time in his life, he was incredibly lucky because the SSR item fell out. He thought this would never happen. This is a miracle that cannot be imagined even in a dream. But the guy didn't give up, so now he was crying with joy. This was his last hope, and now the map is in his hands. A card that allows you to create an account in the Yggdrasil Labyrinth. There's only one way to access the place. Use your game account avatar. An avatar is a virtual body that never appears in the real world, but it is the only way to transport objects from the labyrinth to the outside world. Weapons, jewelry, books, and much more. These transcendental items have changed the real world. Humanity has become completely dependent on Yggdrasil, and the players who lead the era are important members of society. This qualification is only available to a limited number of people, and right now 7017 got this opportunity. It was incredibly cool because now he can become a player. Joyful, he ran to the exit already thinking about how he would start everything from scratch. He opened the doors, realizing that now all he had to do was register his account in the central zone. However, he could not run far as a strong blow knocked him to the ground. The guy didn't even understand what happened and why he was on the ground. Opening his eyes, he noticed a gang of guys in front of him who took his card. One of the guys handed it to his boss, laughing at the unlucky guy. The boss smiled wryly. After all, he had dreamed of such an opportunity for a long time. He had only seen it in the lists, but suddenly he felt someone grab his pant leg. It was the guy who asked to give him the card, but this only made the man angry. He ordered his boys to do their job, and they headed towards the guy. His body became weaker, and his bruises became more and more numerous. But he still asked to give the card and clung to his trouser leg. This made everyone around him even more angry, especially the boss. He grabbed the guy by the hair and asked if he was really hoping to start a new life. If you buy something from someone else's store, you have to pay a commission. The man then touched the guy's forehead, making a deal with him. The boss gave him a deposit of 30,000 points, supposedly paying for an item that can only be redeemed once. And he ended there, telling the guy that he could do whatever he wanted. After which he hit him again and ordered him to get out of here. But suddenly the weak hand grabbed the pant leg again. The boss was terribly angry because this guy was like a leech. But the guy was saved from another blow by the sudden onset of rain. He heard these guys getting ready to go eat something nice. They were happy, which irritated the guy even more. And suddenly one of the bandits called the boss, pointing to the guy who was somehow able to get up. and in his condition it was almost impossible. The system warned that 7017 had low vital signs. She recommended that he immediately visit a medical facility. But he did not pay attention to the notifications and stepped forward. The boss decided that this fool had not had enough and began to flex his fists. But what was everyone's surprise when the guy headed towards the gaming club? The bandits couldn't believe that the guy was going to knock out another item in this condition. One of them asked what they would do if this guy died, but the boss didn't care. In principle, no one cared about the death of no names. But the guy was not going to give up, even though it was painful and difficult for him to breathe. He didn't even notice the worried faces of other people around him. He only felt that his head was spinning. But he confidently walked forward straight to his slot machine. The car only had time to greet him when the guy fell to the ground. Nevertheless, his hand reached for the button. He used his last strength to press it with a trembling hand. I just wanted to try my luck one more time, hoping for the best. It was already starting to get dark in my eyes, just as my last hope was fading away. The guy already thought that his life was simply terrible, but suddenly a bright light appeared. The boss, who was watching all this, stared at the screen in surprise. The light completely absorbed the guy, enveloping his body. Opening his eyes, the guy realized that he was standing behind the podium and did not understand anything. He didn't understand why he was handcuffed and it was dark all around. Suddenly a voice from above said that the guy was expelled from the guild for leaking confidential information. He started shouting that this was nonsense and it wasn't him. But the voice continued that by the court's decision the defendant was found guilty and was stripped of his title. The guy suddenly lost his voice and voices around him congratulated him on the beginning of an unknown life. The guy turned around and wanted to say that he didn't do it. He just wanted to earn money to pay for his mother's operation. But the voice replied that it was too late and ordered 7-17 to wake up. The guy suddenly opened his eyes and found himself in an unknown place. It was some kind of fantasy, because he did not understand how he got into this world in the first place. Then a round figure flew up to him and asked him to enter the character's name. The guy asked in fear why this scoundrel scared him so much and why did he look like a robot vacuum cleaner. The vacuum cleaner responded that this was quite rude, calling itself the Kugan random box system. And now, he wants to congratulate his master because he is the only one in the world who received the UR rank. The guy was surprised because he thought the Gacha was limited to the ranks N, R, RS, and SSR. But the system replied that the guy is now between reality and the world of Yggdrasil. But there's a reason she needs the master's name to complete registration and gain access to the Labyrinth. But the guy replied that this requires an avatar created using a game account. The system responded that this was the limit of modern human technology, which had nothing in common with it. But she intervened because the master was in critical condition, so his body was transformed to access Yggdrasil. This guy needed to enter his name, but he still didn't believe what was happening. If this is not a dream, then this is his huge chance, so he entered his name, Ryuki. After this, the setup was completed, and the guy went into the Labyrinth. A bright light pierced his eyes, after which access was granted. And when Ryuki's eyes opened, they didn't believe what they saw. The system welcomed the player to a wonderful new fantasy world. It was colorful and bright, and there was a freshness in the air. Suddenly, the already surprised guy felt the wind in his hair. He also felt the ground under his feet again. The simulations he had seen on the monitor could never compare to this landscape. He had been waiting for this moment for a very long time when he saw skeletons approaching him. These monsters suddenly started attacking Ryuki. He began to run away, thinking that there was not even training in this game. And he is already fighting a level 1 skeleton, an undead whose malice has seeped into the bone marrow. Due to the fact that the skeleton did not have a body, it was weak to physical attacks. The guy wanted to open the status window, but the system said that this was too shameful. Ryuki replied that he didn't even have a weapon, thinking that she should appear with the player. The system said that the master is not a specific player of the maze, so the system does not apply to him. In other words, he cannot receive level, status, etc. from the fantasy world. This maze is on a completely different level, and to get something you need to spin a random box. To do this, he had one ticket to the Kugan system, which he had to log into every day for a week to get an SR ticket. This mission was completed, so the guy did not receive a ticket to the Labyrinth, but he still had 105 tickets from the Kugan system. Seeing this, Ryuki ordered to turn everything around. He was hoping that something useful would drop as a weapon to use against the skeletons, and then an object materialized in his hand. The guy became more confident by joking that he would use the bones of these skeletons as broth for ramen. However, the skeleton easily broke the guy's object, which was a toilet brush, for the toilet. The guy looked disappointed at the broken brush in his hand. And then he shouted at the system, but it replied that with rank UR it is very difficult to pull out an item of rank N, and apparently the master is not a very lucky person. The next item was a wig that fell right onto the skeleton's head. The guy got even more angry, and suddenly the system warned him to be more careful when running. But before the guy even had time to realize this, he tripped and fell down. He stood up and saw in front of him a skeleton in a wig with a sword in his hands. Then the guy immediately called the Yuguan system, and then finally he saw something worthwhile fall out of the box. It was an R-rank short sword that Rocky immediately used to protect himself. The guy was happy because he finally got a normal weapon. Now these knuckles had better take care of themselves since Ryuki decided to attack. The guy was sure that with this weapon he would defeat the skeleton. But suddenly he felt the enemy's sword wound his shoulder. Then Ryuki realized that the power of the short sword was not enough to quickly destroy the skeleton. The system reminded that health is also no exception to the maze system, so the guy can be injured. He thought upset that he would now miss out on the most wonderful chance of his life by dying from a first-level monster. But he didn't want to give up completely, so he used more tickets. The skeleton was already ready to strike again. Well, the guy jumped away sharply, and then repelled the attack with the help of boxes. But suddenly he saw something unusual fall out of the box. This was a skill that Ryuki assumed did not exist in the fantasy world. However, he saw an SR rank parry skill, and after that a sword skill of the same high rank dropped. The system said that the Yuguan random box is not subject to any system restrictions. Therefore, not only skills, but anything else can be dropped. And while the guy was listening to the system, the skeleton attacked him from behind, but he easily repelled his attack. The guy used his parry skill that he had just received. It worked, and the skeleton flew away from Ryuki's attack. And then the guy swung and smashed the enemy in half with his sword. And this was thanks to his sword skills. Even a stick is dangerous in the hands of a master. Ryuki was surprised that he could freely use skills that were not in the existing Labyrinth system. He ignores its laws, but this is the balance of Yggdrasil. Suddenly the system joyfully said that it did not doubt its master, who had received the rank of UR. He was the first person to obtain an SSR rank item on the first day. Ryuki smiled because today he really had a great opportunity. Therefore he will not be surprised if another miracle occurs. So the guy reached for a new object. But suddenly skeletons flew at him from behind. But if this chance saves him, he won't stop. He grabbed the box and turned around, destroying all the skeletons above him with a blow. This world of phantasm, WAP for short, is a masterpiece of the gaming industry. It was created by the gaming company Gacha. She was a great monopolist in creating games. The goal of each player is to take first place in the Labyrinth. And Ryuki is no exception, that's why he fights. Soon all the skeletons were defeated, for which the guy received a magical skeleton core. He sighed tiredly and looked at the bright ball in front of him. Taking it, he decided that it seemed that was all. According to the battle report, Ryuki destroyed 7 skeletons and received 5 cores, for which he received 70 random box points. They were used here instead of experience because the guy didn't have a level system. And by the way, it was worth taking a look at what kind of SSR rank item was dropped last. The guy couldn't believe his luck, but the system just grinned and said that if this was too much for the master, then he was not worthy of this item. Ryuki then decided to keep this item private for a while, which surprised the system. But the guy didn't want to say the reason because then he wouldn't be able to destroy that guild. Therefore, let him remain with 2 rank 1 level SR skills for now. The next level required 700 RP mastery, so the guy decided to go look for enemies. I didn't have to search for long, as the skeletons themselves came across it. Ryuki decided to quickly destroy them all. After all, time is the key factor when it comes to destruction. Thus, there was a fierce battle in the forest. Soon the guy managed to destroy the last skeleton and take its core. The guy spent 3 days on this, completing all the missions. Time in the maze passed 10 times faster than in reality, so Ryuki received 1,500 points in 7 hours. The system was happy because the master was able to get 10 gacha at the training ground, which is amazing. Suddenly, she got stuck and started repeating the word gacha. Ryuki decided to ignore it and increase his sword skills and parries with these points. The system was shocked because these precious points could have been spent on something more worthwhile. Then the guy asked what is the probability of each rank appearing, and the system answered that N, 70%, R, 27%, SR, 2.7%, SSR, 0.3%. Ryuki then angrily said that his rewards were too lame when he just spent points on spinning. But the system tried to persuade the master to give her the points she needed so much, but the guy replied that there were enough tickets for the random box. The system asked the master how long he was going to stay in this forest because it was purely for training. But the guy knew that he needed a weapon because he knew much more about this game than anyone else. Therefore, he must use all the information he knows, even in the learning forest. This is an ideal insurance platform, as well as a one-way zone. He will not be able to return here. Therefore, he needs to level up as much as possible, but in the system, he replied that he wanted to see how much he would advance without adjusting his level and status. So in 7 game days, Ryuki received 1 Yuguan ticket and 1 SR ticket as a bonus. The guy realized that it was time for him to level up, after which he tested his skills, which increased to level 3. This was the limit of skill that could be achieved here, so it was time for the next stage. The system suddenly said that it was time for a random box. The guy agreed, hoping that with a confirmed SR, he would definitely not get any nonsense. The box suddenly lit up too brightly. This must be the incredible WAP pickup truck. He received an SR bayonet-type sword pistol, a weapon with a pistol attached to the blade. The cylinder's energy increases the power of the blade, which can be used as a pistol. It was a weapon that destroys the worldview of this game, because if the real world knew about it, there would be an uproar. But now the sword in his hands was able to cut a huge tree with just 1 blow. Even considering the guy's skill, the weapon is quite powerful and clearly better than a short sword. Now Ryuki was wondering if he would die in real life if he transformed his body. The system replied that even if the master dies, he can be revived using a backup copy of Yggdrasil. However, this is very painful and the master will most likely want to die. This seemed like nothing to Ryuki because everything would be fine until he died. In the meantime, he decided to purchase a gacha for all the remaining tickets in order to increase his power, and he received a set of R-rank leather armor, which was safe and durable. The system said that the master looked good finally, although he was indignant, because she herself threw him onto the battlefield without a weapon. Even though the system made a mistake with the coordinates, the guy still got into the game, so now he asked it to record all his game actions. She agreed and asked for a name for such files, and Ryuki called it The Story of the Escape of a No-Name from the Depths of the Sea. Yggdrasil creates a labyrinth more refined than the originals it absorbs, although most of the Razzia games are mass-produced and full of nonsense. They say it's a worthy job and it concerns this place. For example, the boss of the second half of the game may appear in an early area. It was the Dark Knight of House who received the blessing of the God of Chaos. He was waiting for the strongest in his tower to fight. For destroying the Dark Knight, the system will give 10 Yuguan tickets and 1 SR rank ticket. This was a very cool, unexpected mission for Ryuki, and the experiment began for him. The Demon Knight was looking forward to the strong man. He attacked the guy and asked him to show him his strength. But Rocky did not budge, defending himself with his sword. He smiled and used his level 3 parry skill. As the guy thought, he was able to ignore the difference in attack power and level. But the demon turned out to be stronger than Ryuki expected. He then swung his sword, deciding to use it as a pistol. But his attack didn't work, even though he thought otherwise, because the system doesn't affect him. Suddenly she said that the master could ignore the WAP system correction and break through the protection. But the guy replied that this was ineffective. Then the system called him a fool and asked him to use his brains. And then she asked whether such a blade could compete with metal armor. But for sure, the guy thought only about strategic moments, forgetting that Labyrinth is a world created based on a game motive. The system would work for an ordinary player, but Ryuki is different. And if this is so, then he will definitely use it in his attack. All he had to do was aim at the weak points. The knight rattled his armor and rushed into a counterattack. But the guy was able to dodge and get closer to the enemy. The knight put out his sword for protection. Then their blades crossed in an unequal confrontation. And then Ryuki changed the blade, instead of which a revolver appeared. He shot straight at the Iron Knight, who flew away. Thus Ryuki's enemy was wounded, and his hand flew to the side. She fell right next to the monster. He roared in pain, staring at the guy. He understood that health in the labyrinth is just a system. But being a Yuguan player, it is clear that damage can be caused to the enemy himself. If you aim at vital points, you will be able to destroy the enemy with one blow. The system wanted to warn that this was dangerous, but it was too late. The enemy wounded the guy in the shoulder from afar, which is strange, because the Dark Knight shouldn't be able to do this. However, it turned out that the power came from his hand lying to the side. The knight himself said that demons are ferocious creatures that pose a threat to God. So now everyone will taste his despair. The attack now began not only from the Dark Knight. His hand releasing dark energy attacked from the other side. Ryuki had to run away, dodging the blows. The Dark Knight is the boss of the second half of the game and cannot be defeated during the tutorial. Moreover, if you die here, it will be impossible to return. And at that moment, the enemy was able to hit the guy, delivering a strong blow. He coughed because he was trapped, and even more sharp tentacles rushed towards him. Then there was darkness because Ryuki couldn't believe it. At that moment, he remembered how, while working as an expert analyst for the Lindsay Guild, he developed a strategy that was constantly rejected. But the boss replied that Renell had already rejected this plan, and it was no longer effective. Therefore, Ryuki, as an ordinary ranked player, must come up with something better, because he is not even a player. The guy realized that the recapture did not suit the ace of their guild. But Ryuki was also sure that the boss would definitely not refuse Renell. Then the guy hit the table with great force. But this was already at his workplace because the guy did not want to obey Renell in everything. But still, he decided to calm down because the main thing for him now is to earn money for his mother's operation. Ryuki wanted to be promoted this month, but then he suddenly heard a voice calling him. He got scared and turned around, seeing an apologetic girl with coffee in front of him. It was Cynthia, who decided to treat her tired colleague, for which he was grateful. Cynthia was a guild researcher and immediately understood why Ryuki was upset. He was wasting too much time on that rejected leadership. So Cynthia decided to offer her help. Then Ryuki pointed to the last part of the manual and said that it was secret, and then asked the girl to request the necessary materials from her superiors. Cynthia, without thinking for a long time, decided to help her friend. Moreover, she smiled and said that she would be happy if she helped him. That same day, Ryuki visited his mother and said that she had finally been given a date for the operation. She was worried because it was expensive, but the guy replied that this time his plan was accepted. The surprised and joyful mother could not believe it. He replied that it was all thanks to Cynthia, but the mother hugged her son and thanked him. She was truly proud of him, but now he was trying to convince her that they had nothing to worry about. But the next day, the guy was informed that he was being fired for using hidden technologies. There is evidence, and if it weren't for Cynthia, they wouldn't even notice it. Hearing the girl's name, Ryuki was shocked. Then Lindsay's guild deputy, Renell Darius, yawned and asked why they were wasting time on this. After all, this is the same guy who kept publishing annoying guides. Renell always wondered who this fool was because the last publication was terrible. It was bad for Cynthia to communicate with such a loser, but now, as Renell promised, he will become her support. Standing up with the girl and hugging her, he went to the exit, finally saying that Ryuki is a terrible analyst. And then he whispered in his ear that the guy shouldn't have talked behind his back, as it was too bold an act. It looks like the guy forgot his duties, but today Renell will celebrate, because today Ryuki's life ended. Today the guy lost his title and became a no-name. Now it had a new status in user authentication. The guy understood that he had been deprived of everything, his job, his family, and even his name. He couldn't just surrender to the Dark Knight, he decided to fight to the end. To the demon's surprise, Ryuki was able to withstand its attack by grabbing onto the tentacle. The monster did not understand where the guy got his strength from, but was confident of his victory. Raising his sword over him, the Dark Knight said that now his enemy is finished. Ryuki was already saying goodbye to life to himself, but still couldn't believe it. In this game, his life did not change. He still remained in the cesspool. He promised that he would return everything bad to the guild and help his mother. He couldn't just give up now. Thoughts of revenge helped him break the tentacles and escape from the clutches of the monster. He wasn't going to just run away or even just attack. Now he was determined to rise from the very bottom. Jumping high, he grabbed the Dark Knight's helmet, and then he struck with his sword. He remembered Renell and Cynthia, the trash of this world. Thoughts about these people gave him strength to destroy the enemy. His eyes burned with rage, and he pointed his sword at the demon. With one blow, I managed to destroy the strongest monster. For this, he received the Dark Knight's magic stone and his armor, as well as Yuguan tickets. The last words were the demon's confession that Ryuki is a strong person. He has overcome the darkness, so now he must only go forward. But the guy understood this even without the words of the Dark Knight. The destroyed monster disappeared, but Ryuki did not know that he was being watched all this time. A video of his struggle was uploaded online a few hours ago. The identity of the player was known to the viewer, and he asked the assistant to detain his car. It was Gabriel Darius, the Lindsay Guildmaster, who turned and asked where Renell was now. It was necessary to discuss with him a video uploaded to the platform today. She became quite popular because the no-name was called a masochist. No one could defeat the Dark Knight at this level, so everyone thought it was a bug. Such a monster couldn't get into the tutorial, especially since the guy had some strange sword, gun, and parry skill. It wasn't like the WAP world, although there were similarities, but it all looked like crap. However, the Dark Knight has already been defeated and the training area has suffered. This could only be explained by a bug or warm-up for the game that needed to be fixed, but is it really impossible to explain such a reaction speed? Rangar, a second-level analyst for Lindsay's guild, watched Ryu7017's fight several times. Even as a good analyst, she couldn't fully understand the video. It didn't seem like an error, so the guild boss had better contact this player, but then she was interrupted. The senior above her said that there must be an error on the unknown account, so she shouldn't tell the boss. However, the information reached Renell quickly, but he did not even remember who Ryuki was. The speaker replied that this guy was fired 3 years ago and was an analyst in the guild. He was fired at the request of Renell, but he got angry and said that there were too many such people, and he could not remember a person with such a description. Then the man said that today a video was uploaded of this guy defeating the Dark Knight. Renell did not see a problem with this, continuing to sit at the table with the girls, thinking that the player was simply using bugs. The man wanted to warn Renell about the danger, but he just got angry and said that he would stop bothering him over ordinary garbage. Such people are a waste of time, and their small victories are meaningless. Then Gabriel left his brother's room and told the assistant that he needed to be careful with this player. But for now, it's better to just watch his actions. It's not urgent enough to act right away, so it's best to gather information first. But the stupid and frivolous brother bothered Gabriel as he squandered a lot. But Renell's problems had not yet affected Ryuki, who was recovering from the battle. Internal organs were damaged and bones were broken, so the system was worried about the master's condition. The guy was in pain, but he knew that he needed to get used to this since the pain would always be there. In the meantime, it was necessary to get out of the area for beginners. Now it was time to say goodbye to this zone because an interesting world awaited him ahead. It was built around the main continent, and the tower in the center was the Demon God Tower. Now the guy can't get there since he first needs to conquer different dungeons to increase his abilities. Suddenly, the system said that it did not understand why the guy released the video so quickly because he showed his enemies his strength. Ryuki knew he was taking a risk, but he knew it would most likely be considered a mistake. Moreover, they will definitely start by collecting information, and since the guy is a little offended by Lindsay, he can afford to show off. Perhaps the guild leader will suspect that this is a trap, unlike Renell. Releasing a video is a strategy to confuse them. Moreover, increased attention limits the guild's capabilities. And if the transformation that the system told Ryuki about is true, then it is possible to hide a real body in the labyrinth. The guy already knew a way to crush Renell Darius, but he needs to be lured into the game. To do this, you need to attract attention to yourself so that Renell goes to investigate. And this will be Ryuki's only chance to defeat him. Suddenly, the system invited the master to play Gacha, so that they wouldn't get bored on the road. 20 Yuguan tickets and 2 SR rank tickets and another 15,000 RP points. The guy said that he must leave the labyrinth every 10 days for safety reasons, but the system replied that the avatar is the body of a master. This is a different technology. Physically, the player remains in reality, but there is a conversion. A method of transferring the body which the system performed during the battle with the Dark Knight. The guy realized that this was his real body, and on the advice of the system, he decided to return to reality. He completed the conversion and ended up in the random box store. This is where he was last, and suddenly the system reappeared. She offered to spin the box, but the guys were only interested in why he didn't feel any pain, because he was near death in the game. The system responded that this was a UR rank privilege, and then warned that there were cameras in the store. Ryuki didn't have time to block them when people he already knew appeared on the threshold. This was the same gang of bandits whose leader was waiting for the return of No Name. Looking at them, the guy immediately remembered what they did to him.
Fear and bewilderment froze in his eyes.
The leader replied that thanks to the cameras he reacted quickly because the No Name received something interesting yesterday. And while he was talking, the guy jumped out the window and ran away. The system flying behind him asked why the master was leaving, and he replied that it was obvious. He alone cannot cope with 10 bandits, so the system decided to help and suggest an escape route. She became a navigator for the guy, telling him the way to confuse the bandits. Ryuki wasn't sure if he could trust the system, but he had no choice. He saw a dead end in front of him, a huge brick wall with barbed wire on top. Ryuki turned around and hit the system because he trusted it. And when the system responded that it had a reason, the bandits had already reached the fugitive. Out of breath, the leader asked how the guy was able to get a second ticket. Then he extended his hand and said that if he wanted to live, he had better give it to him in an amicable way. Ryuki understood that these guys wanted Yuguan from the very beginning, so he called the system. She suddenly said that there was a wooden sword on the left side, but there was an ordinary stick there. Unfortunately, the master did not have any objects that could be transferred to reality, so the system found the closest path to at least some kind of weapon. The guy picked up a stick and asked where this wooden sword belongs. He didn't understand what he should do with this stick, but suddenly it lit up. The bandits laughed because they couldn't be defeated with this nonsense and decided to attack. One of them ran out and swung at the no-name, making a mocking joke. Before he could finish his joke, the bat flew out of his hands, and then Ryuki's stick hit the bandit in the face and threw him back. All the other bandits were shocked because they didn't expect this. Then the head ordered everyone to attack the no-name together. But the guy smiled, realizing that he could use the skills from the Labyrinth. Level 3 parry and level 3 sword mastery came in handy. Now it doesn't matter how lucky the guy is, but the chance to use his skills in reality is a great cheat. The bandits couldn't believe that some no-name was so strong. People began to blame the boss for deciding to defeat the guy with their help. But then the boss shouted angrily so that the bandits would not let themselves be deceived. And it doesn't matter that this guy is strong, because there are many more of them. The boss himself considered the impudent no-name to be arrogant. You can't become stronger because of one item. But they are the Black Mamba gang. And the no-name is no match for the ruler of this territory. But what happened next surprised the boss. He heard his people screaming for help. No-name scattered all the enemies in a couple of seconds. The guy himself felt great at his level. He used his sword skill, which increased further. When Ryuki took this stick, the skills from the Labyrinth returned to him. The guy's conversion was different from that of ordinary players because he transformed his body, not his avatar. Now the guy will become stronger in the Labyrinth, which will be reflected in reality. Then he told the frightened bandits that yesterday they had taken away his right to create an account. Therefore now they are finished, but they were not going to give up and attacked. But their uncontrollable rage played a cruel joke on them. Ryuki repelled enemy attacks very quickly. Well, now it's time for the boss. Yesterday this man helped Ryuki a lot, but he didn't want to give up and ordered the no-name not to approach. However, he easily knocked the weapon out of the boss's hands, and then activated the level 3 parry skill. He then said that the boss must avenge his subordinates since they had fallen. But he got up in fear and began to run. But Ryuki stopped him by pressing his hand with a stick. She never reached the bat, and the boss winced in pain. But he, like the boss of the Black Mamba, did not want to give up, hitting the guy with his second fist. But before the blow could reach its target, Ryuki hit the impudent man with a stick. He then said that everything looks funny when you are strong, and the boss felt that way yesterday. But now, having beaten him down, Ryuki felt relieved. That day, the right to create an account, which they took away, was his only hope. So now Ryuki will deprive the boss of hope, just like he did to him. The boss warned that the no-name might have problems, but the guy didn't care. He swung because he just wanted the man to shut up, but he begged for mercy. However, Ryuki did not hear him and dealt the final blow to the enemy. Later, the system asked why the guy didn't destroy all these people, but he replied that he didn't want to stoop to their level. It is too easy to destroy a person, so he simply pressured them to remain silent. The system realized that fear and violence are human weaknesses, but then Ryuki asked what the system did to the bandits. She replied that she had interfered with the internal workings of the seed boss and manipulated the visual part of his brain. But this operation works when a person is mentally unbalanced. At that moment, the boss saw the master as a terrible monster, so he would no longer want to take revenge. But still, the guy decided to hide the existence of the system because the world would turn upside down if he found out about it. Therefore, Ryuki decided to build something in his old, poor, and dilapidated house. There he found out that he could use the skills even with a carving knife. All types of fencing are learned intuitively. Weapons with a long range are awkward to carry, but a knife is just right. But Yuguan said that the master originally lived outside of Yggdrasil. But because of his rank, the Labyrinth had no side effects. For example, there is no accelerated aging due to time in the game. That's why he is rank UR. Now it was time to act, and the guy decided to invite the boss of the Black Mamba to a meeting. Having met, Ryuki was surprised that the man recovered so quickly. He replied that these were modern technologies, but he himself was surprised by the no-name's request to meet. Then Ryuki took out a knife and said that it seems that the boss paid for his treatment with money stolen from the guy. But he said in fear that he would return everything in time, but the guy instantly found himself next to the man. Putting the knife down, Ryuki told him not to forget by whose whim he was still alive. Well, then he moved away and calmly said that he needed help and the boss was ready for anything. So they ended up in an abandoned red light district. It was crowded with poor suffering beggars. One of them had a crazy itchy neck and the itching would not go away. But then the boss kicked him away to get through. And then he brought Ryuki to Yerozuya Tenko, a place that everyone uses for illegal transactions. The guy said that it looks like the boss is here and sold the right to create an account. He lowered his gaze in shame, but they still entered the shop. They were greeted by a salesman who came out to the customers. The voice was of an old man, and the guy asked if he was the owner of the store. But then a young guy appeared, introducing himself as Ju Tenko, the owner of Eruzuya. But then, the system said that Tenko's body was not human, but a player's. Facial expressions with the whole body seemed to be prohibited, but Tenko took an expensive model, and he succeeded. However, it's funny to talk about the law with a black market merchant, but Ryuki asked what happened to his right to create. The boss clenched his teeth nervously when Tenko asked why the guy would know this. But then he replied that this lot was rare, so it had long been sold. But this was not the only question that interested Ryuki. The guy had goods to sell, to which Tenko replied that he sells everything, even people. He already really wanted to see the new product. But looking into the bag, Tenko's eyes widened in surprise. What was there was difficult to get. These were different types of magical glowing stones. Tenko asked if Ryuki knew their value, but the guy asked not to mock him for being a no-name. He knew basic things. Artifacts from the Labyrinth are divided into two types. The first includes those that cannot be used in the real world, and the latter includes objects that materialize in this world. Magic stones are a special artifact from which ether is extracted, and the higher their rank, the more pure ether can be extracted. Tenko said that to increase the status of the player, it is better to sell them legally, but the guy replied that he did not want to publicly sell what he received himself. Tenko believed that some no-name himself received the magic stones. Then he turned to Luke and said that it was time for him to go home. The boss looked at Tenko with disappointment, but didn't argue. The merchant looked calmly and told Luke to do it now. The man did not have time to come to his senses before he was kicked out the door. Tenko continued, because he thought that just a lucky guy came to him and stole magic stones. He didn't think no names were strange, but something unusual had recently appeared. He was talking about that very sensational video, because he did not expect to see a player from it in his store. Therefore, Tenko greeted Ryu 7017 with a friendly expression. If a guy was trying to hide his identity, he needed to be more careful. And this magic stone is the world of phantasm. This is the magic stone of the Dark Knight of Hausa. It is impossible to get in the training area. Then Tenko asked again, what is the guy's true purpose in visiting this store? At first, 7017 was silent because he did not understand whether he could be trusted. But then he admitted that he was the same player and he appreciated Tenko's advice, but he really just came to shop. Then Tenko asked what exactly the guy wanted from the black market dealer. Then Ryuki pointed to his temple and asked if the guy had it. Tenko asked in fear if the guy was out of his mind, but he replied that this item reduces the complexity of the maze. Although the mod is effective, there are side effects, and most of the mods have been cancelled due to lack of functionality and major flaws. Looking at the assortment, 7017 said that Tenko is a merchant, and he definitely has a couple. Even a no-name was able to find a chip that artificially changes the components of the Labyrinth. Then Tenko asked if 2017 saw the dead man near the store. So this person was also a mod user. He said he wanted to experiment with sensory control, so he bought an analgesia mod that increases the pain threshold. Only the result was catastrophic, although he was more dulled, but his other senses became very sharp, and this broke him. He tried to remove all installed mods, but it was too late, so a mod always means death from shock, mental breakdown, and much more. Therefore, the authorities banned its development and got rid of the remaining ones, so now there are only proven public mods. But then the guy said that besides mods, he still has a long way to go with regards to some people. After all, he defeated the Dark Knight of Hausa single-handedly. Many on the internet called him a cheetah for this. Whether it was a genius with cheating skills or trash-exploiting bugs, the guy didn't care. He is not an opponent of any means or methods, and he would rather use them than begin to rot here. Then the merchant realized that the guy knew how to work with mods, and he was interested in what would happen next. 7017 himself knew this, then Tenko pointed to a nearby shelf. Even though most of the mods were removed, the merchant was lucky enough to keep a couple. If the guy doesn't really know how to use them, then it would be a good idea to try one of them first. Ryuki knew that they were very dangerous, but he had Yuguan, and the guy decided to consider mods. The first mod, which increases attack power by 3 times, was, according to the system, terrible, since it would not bring any effect. The 1-second forward mod, forecasting the future, was a better idea, but it cannot be implemented and it can even become a hindrance on the battlefield. The mod that turns everyone beautiful may have a principle like hallucination, but it is useless. A mod to increase sensitivity by 3,000 times will only harm the wearer. All these mods were garbage. The guy didn't think that everyone wouldn't be so useless, but then he found a mod for manipulating probability. The system said that the person who created this is a genius, since the mod allows you to influence events that can actually happen. The probability of all Yggdrasil outcomes will be approximately 0.3%, 0.5% more favorable for the player. Considering the guy's avatar, the probability will increase by 0.51%, and although these numbers are small, you can apply them to a random box. Thinking that this was the most useful mod, the guy decided to buy it, but the system called the master a fool. After all, the choice is based on increasing the bet of the random box. But Tenko approved the choice. After all, out of all the garbage, the guy chose only normal fashions. Tenko explained that he did not want to deceive 2017, but for customers who request mods, the merchant offers to take a test. As an apology, the merchant decided to give a discount so that the guy could use these things which had been erased since they appeared on the scene. Then, 7017 purchased a mod that could only be installed once, and its installation could not be undone. After installing it, the merchant decided to ask one last question. If a guy can actually master the mod, what is he going to do with that power? Then a small smile appeared on Ryuki's face, because he had a plan for a long time. The merchant did not pose a danger to the guy, so he revealed his desire to him. Such statements even made Tenko slump across the table. And then he laughed out loud, because even if he told someone this information, no one would believe him. This guy's about to conquer the top of the world. He has already started with the bronze and silver part of it, the large gangs. Next, gold and platinum in the form of guild leaders and perhaps a diamond, which is also called the king, await him. But Ryuki will crush all the trash that stands on top of the world. The merchant, hearing this, realized that it would be interesting. He said that Mr. No Name could come to him at any time of the day, after which he got lost in the crowd. But the guy was not going to hesitate and soon went into the Labyrinth. Here he wanted to buy a player card. But the system thought that because the master had no name, they would have problems. But everything went surprisingly smoothly because Ryuko was in a labyrinth, and no one even thought that he was a no-name. Moreover, this village looked quite peaceful. Children ran here, adults went shopping and smiled. It looked like a scene from some medieval period. That system asked when the master would spin the random box, but the guy irritably called Yuguan a gambler. He has a lot of tickets, so this can be done at any time. But then the guy noticed that these civilians were somehow looking at him suspiciously. The system didn't understand what the master did wrong, but the guy replied that NPCs hate people because stupid players called them unrealistic insects. They committed many atrocities, so it is not surprising that the locals react this way. Then Ryuko noticed how someone threw the naked guy and the thief aside. Then the merchant attacked this guy, who tearfully made the excuse that he was hungry. The fight was drawing a crowd, and Ryuki only noticed that it was getting too noisy. But then he noticed that this NPC's clothes were not the same as everyone else's in the village. The system replied that the thief was a resident of a labyrinth called Space Alien, and Yggdrasil completed this game 3 months ago. This means that this game has completely disappeared. People travel to other labyrinths to survive, so they have no other choice. Ryuki noticed that it was really noisy here, and all because some were unable to adapt to the other world. Yuguan said that the gentle labyrinths are being destroyed by Yggdrasil, and WAP may face the same fate. But the guy replied that then they need to act even faster in order to destroy Renell and Lindsay before the end of the game. It was already late, and we had to look for a place to stay for the night. When Ryuki was able to find the house, the system reminded him about the gacha again. But the guy said that we need to check the mod first. The likelihood of random boxes has really increased. The percentage of H rank has decreased, and the rest have a higher table, which is not bad. From a terrible 0.3%, the chance has increased to 1%. And although this is small, it is already something. Then the guy smiled and said that now they will do what Yuguan has been waiting for so long. Spin the gacha. The system was happy and reminded that the guy had 40 regular tickets, 2 SR-level tickets, and 15,730 RP points. The rarest item can also drop this way, but it's better to start with 40 tickets. From them, Ryuki received a lot of all sorts of junk: a wooden spear, shampoos, health potions, energy drinks. He now has an exchange of silver and copper coins, sleeping meat, depilatory gel, an iron shield, and more. A whole bunch of unnecessary things ended up right in the guy's room. He looked at her with surprised eyes and realized that everything sucked. Ryuki couldn't believe that out of 40 tickets, not a single SR fell out, so the mod was nonsense, but the system decided to console the master and offered him to sell toothbrushes. The evil guy turned around, calling her a stinking vacuum cleaner, and said that she better give him a good item. But Yuguan asked the master to stop because all this was done for his sake. Suddenly a bright light appeared and several boxes flew out of the darkness. It was an SSR rank item which couldn't help but make the cheater happy. These were new skills, sprinting and intuition. Intuition strengthened the sixth sense and could allow one to look into the root of the world. Everything was clear with the sprint. It made it possible to move quickly. But intuition was a mysterious skill, so 2017 decided to look at his equipment. After using it, the guy did not feel any changes and decided to check the level up points. To reach the next level of intuition, 7,000 points were needed. This was a lot, because other skills had 3 times less. Yuguan said that it is stupid to waste points on unknown skills, so you can play the gacha again. But Ryuki said that they would rather spend it on improving the skill, which upset the system. But this is how the guy improved his sword skills to the 4th level and strengthened his attack when using it. He also improved his parry skill, increasing the attack impulse. With it, he increased the sprint skill to the 2nd level, providing instant movement at high speed for 14 meters. I had a balance of 8730 points. If he spent them on wielding a sword, he would reach the limit in the Yuguan system. While the guy was thinking, the system still did not lose the chance to persuade him to scroll through the boxes. But Ryuki still raised his sword skill to the 5th level amid the cries of the system. Now this skill was at the maximum level. It was impossible to raise him higher at this stage. But the guy had the opportunity to increase his rank. Without hesitation, he took advantage of it, despite the system's babble. Suddenly, a bright flash appeared in front of him, which tensed him. It was as if a meteorite had appeared in front of him, and he asked Yuguan to explain what it was. But the system did not respond and lay silently on the floor, broken. The huge stone began to glow brighter, and feathers appeared around it. A whirlpool of light was created from them, and the guy's level increased to the maximum value. As a reward, he received 15 Yuguan tickets. And then the sword skill was revealed, which was enhanced by the influence of Yggdrasil. Now, when using a sword, it was possible to activate the 1st level Aura Blade. Ryuki couldn't even imagine such strength as his SR rank improved to SR+. Many players cannot even master ordinary swordsmanship, and this skill cannot be surpassed by anyone. The system didn't understand why it chose this man as its master, because it just wanted to watch him rejoice at the drop of different boxes. But Ryuki told Yuguan not to mope, as it was time for them to go to the dungeon. In it, Renell took 1st place, and it's time to knock him out of there. Ryuki knew the dungeons he conquered well, so he was confident that he would not lose to Renell. And while he was heading into it, a small team of players was about to go through the next dungeon. Their captain said that the main thing is not to let your guard down. But I noticed a guy calmly walking into the dungeon who attracted everyone's attention. The captain asked where this masochist was going alone because this was a very dangerous dungeon. The guy replied that he knew this and entered the portal. The captain didn't know what was wrong with this player, but his crew said to leave him alone as there had been rumors about this dungeon for a long time. For 3 months, no one could conquer him and it would be a waste of time. But Ryuki didn't know about this and entered the dungeon, the witch's hideout. His goal is to break Renell's record. It's time to attack and show everyone what No Name is capable of. But Ryuki did not know that all this time an insidious witch was watching him. She didn't like intruders coming to her. The guy desecrated her sacred place. But he need not worry, as she will punish the intruder. The witch was ready to destroy him with her own hands. For her, this will be a sacrifice worth her strength. But Ryuki entered the witch's dungeon despite this and received a reward in the form of a Yuguan ticket. It was dark there, and you couldn't see what was next. In any case, the structure of the dungeon is constantly changing randomly. The only way to understand its real architecture is to see it with your own eyes, and Renell's record was 17 hours and 30 minutes. The system showed information about the dungeon and a rating of the heroes who completed it the fastest. In 2nd place was the player who achieved the goal in just 17 hours and 38 minutes. 3rd place was already far behind, which meant the player in 2nd place was also trying to break Renell's record. Soon the guy got to the right place, aid to the bats. These creatures attack in groups in caves, where it is difficult to maintain visibility and maintain distance. But they were only a problem in the past. Now Ryuki took out and threw a strange device in their direction. It turned out to be a sound bomb. A few seconds later, a loud explosion was heard in the cave. The system asked what happened now, but the guy replied that bats are too sensitive to noise. Yuguan asked to warn next time, but The guy didn't understand what difference it made to the robot because he doesn't have eardrums. While the guy was destroying the lying bats, the system asked if he was taking too long to complete the dungeon, but he replied that in any case it would take a lot of time. But now he is worried that no one has conquered him for the last 3 months. This place is famous for its low difficulty level, so it's strange. After Renell cleared it, the site became a training site. Suddenly, Ryuki came out to the same place he left from. The system thought that the master was lost. The guy replied that this is not so, because templates are important. Then he asked the system how many strategy guides he thought he wrote when he was an analyst. This dungeon was also in the simulation, and the guy saw it 1,000 times. But Yuguan still didn't understand why the guy was running in circles, but he replied that there was another entrance. He wasn't lost at all, but the system needs to be looked at more carefully. On the third stalagmite on the right, there is a curved scratch, and until now there were only straight ones. Changes occur when you pass this place 32 times, which means the path to retreat is now clear. The system asked in surprise, did the guy really remember the route like that? Ryuki wearily replied that it was a magical dungeon designed to make players get lost, so the structure of the cave changes in real time. The original plan was to find the right path using skills, so Renell included allies with them in his squad. But before discovering such skills, Ryuki memorized the paths on the map to conquer it. In about 5 minutes, they would be at the next point, and this surprised the system. Ordinary players cannot even imagine this, and remembering all this seems incredible. Ryuki knew that they would soon find themselves in the maze, but they were already 30 minutes behind. And there are questions that still need to be resolved. What is the reason for the failure of the players over the past 3 months? And the problem was the witch, who was angry because the invader went through the maze. Now he is definitely finished. She will destroy the villain with her death magic. Having set foot on this earth, Ryuki will become a guinea pig for the witch. And as soon as the guy stepped into a new location, he was enveloped in dark energy. The guy, sensing something was wrong, stared at its source. The system asked the master what was going on, but he had no idea. One thing was clear, it was incredibly dangerous ahead. But Ryuki had a spare rank end doll and a plan in mind. A moment later, the guy threw the doll deep into the dungeon. Having fallen to the ground, the doll was completely absorbed by dark energy. It was black flame, instant death magic, but it is strange for this stage. The system couldn't say anything, but the characteristics of the dungeon had changed, so it was better to leave this place. The guy didn't understand why such cruel traps appeared from the very beginning. Is there really no other way out except retreat? But where to go? Because the right path should be a dead end, but it is clear. So also the magic of instant death. Is this all because of a new skill? With the help of his intuition skill, Ryuki foresaw this. But the witch thought the guy was just lucky. But its destruction is a matter of time because the magic of death is everywhere. He will be scared for the rest of his life, but suddenly the witch lost the guy from her sight in the ball. She didn't understand how this was possible, but she soon found it. He was in the central hall, which was far from that trap. This guy is definitely capable. But it doesn't matter, since this place will still become his cemetery. There are many traps from the witch, but she was surprised every time when Ryuki avoided them. How could he constantly disappear out of sight and end up in the old laboratory? Isn't it on the opposite side of the central hall, a place with a lot of curses? The witch had no idea what Ryuki wanted, but she really wanted his end. The way he avoided the traps and disappeared again was unreal. Now the witch has discovered the fugitive in a warehouse where there were many traps. She decided to activate them all at the same time. It was hard, and the witch's ball glowed with tension. She even felt offended that such precious material as this fugitive was destroyed. But then she heard 2 voices behind her and the sound of an explosion. The voices got closer and the witch turned around. It was Ryuki who was chatting with Yuguan and was completely calm. The witch was horrified and didn't understand how they got here. But the guy replied that it was too troublesome to answer, so it was better to get it over with as soon as possible. In front of him stood the boss of the witch's refuge dungeon, the lonely witch, Serial. But when the guy took out the sword, he decided that another name suited her better. She is not the boss, but a mistake that happened in the dungeon. And now it's time to deal with her, which is what Ryuki will do. The witch couldn't believe it and asked how the guy got around her traps. Ryuki got angry because this witch intended to destroy him, but suddenly Yuguan said that the master was more like a villain. The guy understood that the exit was still far away, but there was an ordinary bug on his way. You can wait until he is eliminated, but this is a bad idea, because it is better to take a position before the guild begins to act. But suddenly the system said that it had discovered many deadly traps. It is extremely difficult to find out their location, but this did not stop Ryuki. Despite Yuguan's advice to retreat, the guy rushed to attack. Immediately a dark flame appeared behind him, and the system feared for the master's life. Yuguan was surprised by his masochistic mood, but the guy remained alive. The system thought that the master was so upset because of the last Gacha. But when he replied that he did not care, Yuguan objected in surprise. But Ryuki was sure that last time he hit the jackpot in the form of the intuition skill. The witch realized that deception had no effect on him because intuition calculates gaps in space. And this is just the initial level. In the future, the guy will definitely improve it. Yuguan replied that this is still just a feeling that will one day reach its limit. The guy understood that the system was right, but now his main task was to survive here. The lonely witch Cereal was shaking with anger. She released all her strength and shouted that the intruder was finished. But the guy reacted with lightning speed. He jumped straight into the epicenter of the accumulated energy. Ryuki was angry because of this bug he was gonna ruin everything. It is useless to drag out the battle since the witch's attacks are monotonous. It was time to end this fight with the sword. He activated level 3 sprint to attack. But this mistake annoyed Ryuki no matter how you look at it. And then he used his sword skill. The guy admitted that the witch is a strong opponent, so he will finish her quickly. And suddenly the witch unexpectedly rejoiced right before her death that she was free. She was glad that she would leave quietly and no longer follow other people's instructions. Ryuki couldn't believe it was all over. And for good reason, because the witch suddenly turned into something terrifying. There were dark flames everywhere, growing from the witch. Her laughter suddenly pierced the dungeon, and then Yuguan's voice was heard. He said that the witch can constantly regenerate, which the guy did not expect from a bug. Normal attacks definitely won't work on her. Moreover, she became even more dangerous by starting to attack. Ryuki evaded, not neglecting his intuition. One mistake in this battle will cost your life. Yuguan assumed that this might happen, so he changed the characteristics of the evaluation mode in advance. For the first time, Ryuki can identify monsters, which the guy did. The witch Cereal was characterized as a level 25 bug boss, with 3 skills. And suddenly, unexpectedly, this boss grew wings. It seemed that she had acquired this skill in her homeland, the world of Phantasm. Now her ahs became more intense, and Ryuki, dodging, ordered to evaluate the feather. According to the description, the feather of the lonely witch had a special appearance. They were from an alien world that was destroyed 3 months ago. Many who escaped from there are now in the city. The witch suddenly released a huge stream of energy at the guy, but Yuguan consoled him, saying that he was nearby. And then Ryuki realized that this was the reason for the bug. The main thing is not to touch the deadly traps, but the master did not listen and ran forward. The system thought the guy was crazy, but he was going to climb to the top. Nothing could stop him, not even the enormous power of the witch. But Ryuki understood that the main thing was not to touch the traps. At this time, the witch collected energy, pronouncing evil words syllable by syllable. And then she attacked, exploding the accumulated energy. This time she blocked the escape route. But then the guy behind her said that Cereal is the same as this dungeon. Borrowed power always gets out of control and weaknesses are always exposed. Raising his sword above himself, Rocky added that the wings were the cause of the malfunction. But then the witch screamed and asked to wait because these wings gave her freedom. But it was too late, and the wings fell, upsetting Cereal because she had been fulfilling her role here for a long time, and with the help of the wings she was freed from the curse. The guy realized that the witch just wanted to free herself from her role, and it even looked like him. He wants with all his might to escape from this world that looks like a dump. And then the witch said that since they were similar, the guy should understand her feelings. Slowing down, the witch invited him to cooperate. But this was the reason why Ryuki would destroy her freedom. He will cut off these wings for his own glory. And having done this, the guy used the SSR skill, which destroyed the witch's wings. Now the witch Cereal has become herself, a level 20 boss. She had a magic stone, a heart, a robe, an old wooden staff, an amulet of glory, and a mandrake. The witch ordered the guy to kneel, but he killed her with one blow of his sword. Ryuki noticed that nothing had changed after the deformation. The witch will still lose, and he will be one step closer to his dream. So the witch fell, and Ryuki received several achievements at once. For them, the guy received 13 Yuguan tickets as a gift. According to the battle report, the guy received another 500 XP and 500 RP, Cereal's magic stone in her heart. This reward seemed stingy to the guy compared to the Dark Knight, even though the boss was a bug. but the main thing was to break the Renell record. And while Ryuki was happy about the victory, the team at the dungeon was upset that they had lost again. They quarreled, seeking the ultimate in their defeats. The captain tried to calm them down because there were rumors about this dungeon for a reason. He was about to collaborate with another group when he suddenly saw Ryuki coming out. The guys admired the fact that the guy lasted there for 7 hours, but he definitely wouldn't have made it solo. Thinking that the guy had given up and gone home, the captain mockingly shouted that he knew that the guy had little guts, but he realized the reality. But then the man received updated information about the dungeon. He couldn't believe his eyes as the dungeon was completed and the rating was updated. Now, 10 hours apart, the first player in the ranking was a newcomer. None of the team looking after the guy could believe it. And so Ryuki was not allowed to leave quietly. A sword appeared in front of his face. It was one of the players who accused the guy of cheating. "It is impossible to achieve a difference of 10 hours with the first place, so I ordered to tell the truth." Ryuki exhaled and said that there was a bug in the dungeon that shortened the cleaning time. The player suddenly rebelled. How can a guy not be ashamed of using cheats to break the world record? But the player threatening Ryuki said that this was nonsense, and the guy began to lose his temper. He dodged the sword and said that he had fixed the bug, so now they better focus on clearing the dungeon. The player picked up his sword and said that the rogue would not leave him. But Ryuki was only annoyed by such fools whose attacks were predictable. Having dodged, the guy struck back at his opponent with his fist. He flew to the side and coughed while Ryuki walked on. The player was furious, but then a hand on his shoulder stopped him. It was the captain who said that the guy was not their opponent. This guy fixed the bug, but didn't exploit it, so it's stupid to mess with him. The team couldn't believe that one guy could handle all the bugs. Suddenly, the captain thought that he had already seen this player somewhere. And then I remembered the video about the escape of No Name from the depths of the sea and his battle with the Dark Knight. And while the guys were figuring out what to do with this information, Ryuki was studying the location of the Emerald Lake. Next came the Scarlet Spider Forest, the second known location among the first records of Renell and his team. After him, the guy was waiting for the ancient ruins of the gods, which was also the main record. They were all famous, but the guy wanted to conquer these 3 first. Elsewhere, another guild set a new record 2 years ago. As for Archaea's record from the Gaius Guild, the time is very similar to that predicted by the guy from his own strategy. He created it a long time ago, and in principle, he didn't like all of it. Having finished chewing his bread, Ryuki still firmly decided to conquer these 3 places. He wanted to erase Renell's name from the rankings, but he was now inside Jin's tower. After the victory, he ordered the team to collect all the items in order to quickly go home. But then something caught his arrogant gaze. It was a huge octopus that appeared out of nowhere. It was clearly from the Emerald Lake, which alerted Renell. The notification also came from the Scarlet Spider Forest. Then Renell left everything to his team and hit the road. He has matters that urgently need to be resolved. After teleporting home, Renell opened information about the dungeons. His records were broken one after another, like an attempt at provocation. This newcomer wants to beat him, but he is also an unknown. No matter how hard he tried, Renell could not remember this Ryuki. Then an excited assistant burst into the guy's room. He shouted that something was wrong. Ryuki was broadcasting live. Analyst Ragnar watched him in shock. She had some predictions for WAP, but this, no name. He fixed the bug in the witch's dungeon and escaped from the depths of the sea. He was also able to pass through the Scarlet Spider Forest and then the ancient god ruins. Ragnar didn't expect that it was possible to conquer 4 dungeons at the same time and post a video about it. Moreover, they caused a very strong reaction from the audience. He attracted a lot of attention even when he defeated the Chaos Knight. The guy has strange skills and items, but his movements are impossible unless you know the unit structure. Moreover, they need to be learned by heart in order to move quickly. The strategy in the witch's hideout was shocking, because for 3 months, no one could clear it. This RYU707 team put on quite a show and conquered the dungeon single-handedly, causing a flurry of comments. There was a note that this was a staged video, but the fact that the dungeon was cleared is a fact. To implement this, you need to have a talented analyst or guild support. This event caused a storm of indignation, but it is incomparable to defeating the Dark Knight. If you release 4 videos at the same time, they will probably make a splash, but this is nothing compared to 1 more video. The system warned the master that this would make him an enemy of the guild, but he was ready. Yugon advised the master to rest a little and pump up some more. The guy agreed, but could not give them more time as the plan would fail. 3 years ago, from that very day, his time stood still and only 2 emotions remained. Despair and hatred have consumed Ryuki, and this is his only reason why he is still alive. Putting his face on the main screen, Ryuki greeted the audience and introduced himself. Then he said that unfortunately he was not focused on conquering dungeons right now, and on the truth that I would like to tell everyone. Now Ryuki introduced himself as the person who posted the already popular video. Rangar, seeing the famous 7017, noticed that the guy looked adequate, but then he said that from the title of the video you can understand that he is unknown. It is strange that in the Labyrinth there is a no-name who does not have an account, who is required to reach a silver rank, pass a certain exam, and receive recommendations from the guild. People thought it was a joke, but Ryuki convinced everyone otherwise. Regardless of whether they believe him or not, he had a chance to get the account. He's not going to sue over the mean comments, but there's a reason why Ryuki is a no-name. Renell, watching the broadcast, smiled and thought that no-names were nobody in this world. But then Ryuki said that this happened to him because of a false accusation. As the guy said, he won't sue because he has a different reason for distributing the video. Then Ryuki turned to Renell and said that he was probably watching it like the other fools from the Lindsay Guild. The guy hoped they hadn't forgotten him when his reputation fell into the abyss. He had to go through hell, but now the no-name is back. Therefore, he advised everyone to wash their necks since he would come for everyone. The person watching the video, interested incognito, concluded that Ryuki's goal was Lindsay's Guild. Strangers H and V answered him through the screen, adding that the guy was popular and therefore was under surveillance. It looks like he worked for the guild and got fired. Gabriel must have tried his best. Renell Darius, on the other hand, is a valuable candidate to keep an eye on, even though he appears to be just average. Strangers didn't think Lindsay would ignore Roy 7017. That's why we decided to stay on the sidelines for now, because 3 people won't solve anything anyway. The stranger said that he would also watch in this case, but could he do it alone? The strangers from the screen said that they had given up because it was too late, but the man replied that there were no restrictions. But since everything is against him, he will do what he wants, but where will his desire lead? But while the strange strangers were discussing the situation with the no-name, Renell and Gabriel were being interviewed. Gabriel replied that Rui 1017 was once a member of his guild, but was expelled due to an internal scandal. The reporter asked if it was true that Lindsay had falsely accused him. Gabriel flashed his eyes angrily and said that this was in no way justified. But the reporter said that no-names often target players out of resentment, and there is even talk of collusion between Lindsay and WAP. To control the rate of consumption of its content, restrictions were placed on capturing dungeons and issuing items. Can Harold, as the head of the guild, comment on these suspicions? Harold replied that rumors should not be allowed to obscure the truth. It was just a ploy by a competitor. They have already contacted the people involved in Rue 1017 and have all the information about him, so soon everything will return to normal. Lindsay is using all her strength to sue the rumor monger. Here, Jutenko, who was watching this broadcast, turned around, meeting a popular visitor all over the world. Ryuki didn't care what they said about him. He was more worried that the old man's voice didn't suit Jutenko's body. But he replied that he liked it, because the body is his prosthesis, which is very comfortable. But the guy was not interested, and he asked for fashion. Jutenko smiled and replied that Ryuki had upset him. But the mods that the guy saw earlier are the only ones left. But the guy said that this was a lie, because he remembered Tanko talking about a test for clients who wanted a mod. Does this mean that the merchant is associated with the creators of the mod? Ryuki didn't mind being a guinea pig and working directly with the creator. Hearing this, Tanko lowered his eyes and handed the guy the disc with the mod. He was asked to give it to Ryuki if he came again, and if a guy masters this mod, the creator will meet with him. Although it was arrogant, the guy began to learn about fashion through Yuguan. This was the mind's eye, acting on vision and providing information. But it is more powerful and dangerous than the previous mod, and the guy didn't like the idea of testing it. And then Tanko noticed an interesting bag on Ryuki's shoulders. The guy said that there was a magic stone that fell from the dungeon boss. Tanko was delighted and took down the price for the mod. Ryuki was becoming his favorite client. When leaving, the guy realized that the cost of the stone and the income from the video on YouTube were not worth it. Yuguan suggested that the guy do a couple of spins, but he said that he had a meeting. Disappointing Yuguan. The system couldn't believe that the master had another meeting because his social skills were 0. But then his old acquaintance appeared behind Ryuki and greeted him cheerfully. The system could not believe that its master had friends. And what was her surprise when that guy came close to Rocky and asked how he was doing? Moreover, he even put his hand on the guy's shoulder, but he didn't move. Memories from 3 years ago flashed through his head. They were friends who dreamed of the world of Yggdrasil. Things were completely different back then, and Ryuki also considered Garcia a friend. However, it has been a long time to behave so familiarly. Garcia pulled away from Ryuki and asked for a minute. He just wanted to talk, but his fists had already clenched so hard that his nails were digging into his skin. Garcia took his friend's arm and said that he should have seen each other earlier, crossing his clubs behind his back. What happened 3 years ago was terrible, and Garcia didn't know what to do. And speaking of saving the unknown, the friends were walking down the street, and Ryuki didn't even suspect that almost the entire city was watching him. Either way, Garcia smiled and decided to apologize, suggesting they go somewhere else. The guy smiled fakely and agreed, saying that he was really afraid of people's gaze. Taking a cup of coffee, Garcia once again apologized for the past. It was as if he truly regretted the events of 3 years ago. But Ryuki stood up and replied that he still couldn't accept the apology. So he told Garcia to prove that he was sincere. And then the guy said that he had a plan for Ryuki to become bronze. He sat down and said that this was an interesting proposal. But it won't be possible to do this in a short time. Ryuki remembered his time as a student and Garcia again. Ryuki asked a friend for help for his mother's surgery, which was a week away. The guy asked on his knees to help him and lend him money. But Garcia said it was disgusting and kicked Ryuki away. For him, it was a dirty no-name who did not understand the situation. And then he left, leaving Ryuki lying on the ground and thinking about his mother. He simply needed money for his mother's operation. But Mom tried to calm Ryuki down because all these surgeries, hospital bills, etc., this is not the amount that a no-name could pay. Hearing this, Ryuki became more and more disappointed in himself, especially after only a hologram remained of his mother's body. After checking him, the guy was told to leave the premises because there is no place for no-names here. The departure of his mother, the words of Garcia, who called him a dirty no-name and wished him the end, surfaced in his head. Therefore, Ryuki just hung down staring at the cup. And then, with a crazy look, he decided to give Garcia some advice from the past. He was not going to be deceived by such a stupid show. And using his skill, Ryuki realized that Garcia belonged to the Razzia Guild. Recently, the world in the labyrinth of their game was destroyed, so Garcia is in despair. Therefore, Ryuki did not need his help and decided to just leave, but Garcia tried to stop him, saying that he knew interesting information about Lindsay. After all, even its members don't know that the head of the guild is Rinfel's older brother Darius. Hearing this, the guy wondered if Gabriel really rejected his plan. The boss praised the guy as a newcomer, being an ace who was before Renell. Gabriel was looking forward to Ryuki's new plan, but turned out to be a viper. Surely the guy understands that he is a terrible person, so he better listen to Garcia. And no matter how much Ryuki needed it, he clenched his teeth without uttering a word. And then Garcia shouted that he just wanted to discuss his plan. He just wants to use Ryuki's channel for advertising, but the guy, without listening to the end, snatched the business card from Garcia's hands. Ryuki refused because he doesn't need such garbage information. Therefore, the torn business card fell down, which angered Garcia. Because of his plan, he shamefully bowed to the no-name, which is terrible. But now, calling the guy trash, Garcia took out his sword and attacked Ryuki. But then he suddenly coughed because the guy grabbed him by the neck. And then he lifted him into the air, saying that Garcia had better not forget what he did to him. The guy coughed and began to ask to let him go, but Ryuki was serious. Since Garcia attacked him, he wants to die. Therefore, let him lag behind, after which the guy flew into the wall. Leaving Garcia coughing from the blow, Ryuki advised him not to come into his sight again. But he suddenly seemed to say to nowhere that the target had escaped. And the next second, a bunch of armed agents appeared at the door, ordering the guy to stand. But he only launched an attack with great speed, knocking the weapon out of the agent's hands. And then he quickly ran out of the room. The agents chased after the guy, but stumbled upon a dead end, losing sight of Ryuki. But he was able to easily jump over the high fence and escape. The level 3 sprint skill helped him with this. Watching the search for him, the guy thought about Gabriel and such decisive measures. Yuguan even said that his nerves began to get crazy after this. And then he asked the master what he was thinking about. The guy replied that he knew what to do next, but for now he would return to WAP. And while the guy was thinking through the plan, the disappointed Gabriel Garcia stood in front of him and listened to the humiliation. The guy was very sorry and tried to say at least some information. For example, Ryuki is 25 years old. But this angered the boss even more, who had been so let down by Garcia. Gabriel said he wasn't here to hear trivial things about his former employees. Garcia then shouted out that Ryuki most likely won the right to create an account using the Gacha. Garcia said that he could find out more, but Gabriel replied that the right to the account had indeed been taken out. But it was put up for auction and bidding was held. Moreover, there were no terminals in that area, so Ryuki most likely had a follower. This is exactly what Gabriel wanted to know, but Garcia did not know about the guy's life after he became a no-name. Gabriel stood up and said that Garcia was just wasting his time. He is just a loser who is worse than a no-name because he is even ready to sell his friends. When Garcia heard this, he suffered a severe blow to his self-esteem. He is definitely not lower than some no-name, and he will prove it. Taking out a knife, he rushed at Gabriel, shouting at him not to look down on him. But this was a very unwise act, since the attack was immediately interrupted. And then the guy was hit on the floor, completely disarming him. Gabriel was furious, since the attack of bronze on gold is a crime. There are many witnesses, so Garcia will not be able to escape his fate. Usually attackers are sentenced to death, but Gabriel had mercy, after which he said that he was demoting Garcia to no name, which was worse for the guy. He began to beg not to do this, promising to do anything. Being a no-name is the worst thing that could happen to him. But Gabriel did not pay attention to the guy's pleas and hysterics. He thought that Ryuki was a good analyst, but nothing more. Compared to Renell, he should be destroyed. There was definitely someone who made this man special. No matter what methods Gabriel has to use, he will learn the secret of this no-name. But Ryuki did not keep any secrets, but only hatched a plan for revenge. He soon found himself back in the Labyrinth with the help of a rank R teleportation stone. So Ryuki ended up in the village again, but the system was interested in when the master would play the gacha. But that didn't interest the guy at the moment. He thought about the players in the village. This is necessary for the next step in his plan. People must be witnesses. Views of his videos have increased even more, and Lindsay will now begin to act openly. He also competes with the highest guild and the creator of WAP. And he will set a trap for the ace Lindsay. Having removed his helmet, the guy was still pleased with the system and decided to play the gacha. People around immediately began to recognize the hero of the video. There were a lot of rumors about him, but it was strange to see a no-name here. Some were afraid to even approach, because it could be a trap. But the guy just wanted to spin 97 tickets. The login bonus, daily missions, and achievement points, although small, have become a lot over time. For now, Ryuki decided to start with only 10 spins. But he again fell into something useless and low-ranking. Then, to the delight of the system, the guy decided to scroll through all the remaining tickets. Oddly enough, the pile of trash remained a pile of junk, only it got bigger. The guy thought that he would get at least something useful, but he was very disappointed. The system tried to console the master, saying that the world was still beautiful as long as Ryuki was healthy. But the guy didn't have much hope anyway, because he still has 5 SR tickets. Using one of them, Ryuki received a phoenix feather with which he can be reborn one time. This was quite good as it could save a life, but Ryuki decided to open another box. It seemed like there was something new there, and Ryuki was already looking forward to it. But what a disappointment he was when his electric toothbrush fell out. Yuguan said that the master is simply incredible because he finally knocked out a cool brush. The only bonus was that this brush could be transferred to the real world. Yuguan also added useful properties because thanks to the brush you can get rid of carries, and it also runs on batteries. The guy got even angrier because for him it's trash. There were 3 tickets left and Ryuki decided to use them together. Perhaps this is a chance for something good to appear. The guy really wanted a weapon that he could use, but when he saw the results, Ryuki was taken aback with disappointment. He received 3 identical items at once, 3 pistol swords. The people gathered around laughed at the situation and the expression on the guy's face. Someone from the village thought it would be better to tell about Ryuki Lindsay. Suddenly, Yuguan smiled and said that since the master had amused him so much, he had a surprise. A glimmer of hope appeared in Ryuki's eyes and he asked what it was. Because of 3 identical items, the guy received the synthesis achievement, which will allow him to unlock several systems. Ryuki then asked why Yuguan was laughing, but he replied that he had a fetish for the master's fiasco. Deciding not to be angry with the system, Ryuki decided to learn about the new synthesis system. Now it was possible to use skill synthesis and item synthesis, but to start synthesizing a pistol sword you need 10 of these swords. So the guy got a new SR rank sword and pistol. It was crazy cool, but are there any restrictions? And when the system said that the sword can be improved with other weapons, Ryuki took advantage of it. A minute later he managed to further improve his sword. Now he could compress 3 energies into a cylinder and it could be used as a pistol. However, there was an opportunity to mix in another skill. This is how he obtained the supposed skill synthesis list. Saint, Heavenly Sword, or Sword God. The guy was angry that even here it was random, but Yuguan said that you need to get a thrill from it. With the help of synthesis, you can get a stronger skill and there is also a super rank. But the probability of receiving it is 2%, which according to Yuguan is a high chance. It was a stupid question to ask, but Ryuki took a chance and obtained a level 1 SR Holy Sword. It wasn't that offensive, but it was very similar to a combination of regular skills. But why did the level of all the skills drop? Yuguan irritatingly replied that it was also random. In any case, the stage was set. Then the guy asked why Yuguan is so slow-witted in experiments. But then a masked stranger appeared behind him, threatening the guy with a sword. Ryuki calmly asked if Lindsay had sent him, and when the guy already said that it was forbidden to point weapons in the village, he felt a sharp pain. The blade went through the guy's neck in front of everyone, and he doubled over in pain. The stranger said that although he cannot destroy the player here, he can easily cause pain. Ryuki immediately recognized Lindsay's style because the pain felt as if it were real. But what was the use of this mask then? As soon as the guy declared war on Lindsay, he was immediately attacked. Having pierced the body with a sword, the stranger said that now they will follow Ryuki everywhere. Suddenly something happened that discouraged him. The guy, instead of whining in pain, laughed. He fell to the ground and continued to smile, causing confusion in the stranger. But Ryuki said that Lindsay can do so boldly because WAP is their property. The stranger pointed his sword at Ryuki and said that he would turn his laughter into a scream. However, as soon as he swung, the guy activated his sprint. He instantly overtook the enemy and pushed him away. All that remains is to apply 3 warning attacks. Without this, the system of a player attacked by an evil guild would be ideal. The stranger, who did not dare to move under the attack, did not understand what Ryuki was talking about. But the guy replied that this meant it was his turn. What happened next surprised the assembled onlookers. The enemy was already begging Ryuki to stop, but he only asked where all the pathos with which the stranger attacked him. He was also in pain, although the WOP protective system reduces damage and pain. But it doesn't affect Ryuki's attacks, which was a shock to the stranger. As he said, in a forbidden location, it is impossible to destroy, but you can still feel pain. Doesn't the enemy know this? After all, Lindsay did the same thing until now. And then Yuguan became alarmed and decided to warn the master, but he already realized that they were here. The guy was instantly surrounded by many armed soldiers. One of them stepped forward and gave Ryu 7017 a final warning. He should quit the WAP system and end his playing career. The guy did not believe that the guild would make concessions if he did not resist. After all, he was the first to be attacked, so he won't hold back. Having frightened the main man with his blow, the man noticed that the guy was really dangerous. But they won't leave because he saw Ryuki's sword and pistol. This weapon shouldn't be in WAP. Then who brought it? Ryuki told the man to take off his mask and then he would tell, but the man laughed. He added that it was most likely just a bug. But why get into trouble instead of enjoying the game? The enemy was very sorry, but the story of No Name's escape ends here. And the next second, other soldiers attacked the guy like dogs! But he just smiled and dodged the blows. They continued to attack him, but Ryuki dodged. Then the leader appeared, noticing that the guy was fast. He wanted to attack the guy himself, but he dodged and struck back. The holy sword was able to hit the enemy and would have destroyed him if not for the village. The man noticed in surprise that the No Name had not yet reached the tower, but was still using the aura. It uses a lot of mana, so it's strange that the guy uses the skill at such an early stage. Is he really the newcomer who caused the error? But even with such an aura of no name, the enemy was not going to give up. He attacked Ryuki again, but he defended himself. But it seems that this power is not an aura after all, because Ryuki parried the attack too easily and threw the enemy aside. It seemed impossible because the guy reflected all the blows. The leader could not have imagined this, so you need to wait until the parry skill wears off. But the guy suddenly said that it wouldn't be possible to drag out the fight. But apparently they didn't fully understand the situation. Ryuki's skills did not consume mana. If they need a long fight, then the guy doesn't mind training. So far he has fought against monsters, and it will be useful to practice with killers. Before they even had time to process the words, the guy attacked. Everyone around him was shocked by his strength except for one person from the crowd. He watched as the soldiers writhed in pain from Ryuki's attacks. The commander ordered the soldiers not to let themselves be attacked. Ryuki ignores the player's defenses, so the commander ordered everyone to gather. The guy noticed that the enemies had cool and strong weapons, which they pulled out to attack. This means that they no longer hide their identity, because now everything is clear. The squad leader is the double swordsman Cassius. He has the image of a handsome man and a gentleman, so he has his own fan club. This is how he is going to ruin his reputation now. Evil Cassius ordered everyone to freeze and activated the skill. He immobilized the guy using chains of illusion. And then the commander banned physical attacks and ordered attacks from afar. A magnum shot, fast lightning, and a dragon's breath flew at Ryuki. They figured out the parry skill, so they decided to attack. Their power was reunited, creating a huge and powerful clot of energy. No Name will definitely not be able to cope with this. And then all the forces simultaneously attacked Ryuki. A large haze was created, and the guy's eyes became wary. Explosions thundered everywhere, and it was impossible to survive. But a minute later, the guy's legs appeared from the haze. As he thought, thanks to the Holy Sword, it is possible to damage even a non-physical object. He just swung this sword and everything happened on its own. Cassius, looking at the guy with horror, ordered the attack to be repeated. But then one of the soldiers lying on the ground called the captain. But he fell, catching a bullet for the first time in battle from Ryuki's attack. The rest were scared because they had never seen such a weapon. They only now saw that the sword had a trigger. He can hold off a bunch of big monsters. But if the enemy is a person, then this is a completely different story. Guns don't exist in WAP, so even Lindsay's elite can't handle it. And now, since the Lindsays attacked him first, they will die from pain or shock. So let them be ready for this. But as soon as the guy said this, everyone ran away in fear, but another stranger was watching. It was difficult to explain, but all the more interesting. The evasion and protection of these people depended on status. Therefore, there were too many loopholes in their movements, and this was their difference from Master Yuguan, who was always on the verge of life and death. Yuguan blocked all these players from logging out so they couldn't escape the pain. Either way, they are the best players in the Lindsay Guild, but they must have a safety device to protect themselves. And then the guy seemed to sense something was wrong. The next second he jumped to the side, and then there was an explosion. But the guy has seen this skill 1,000,000 times in videos, and it makes him feel bad. If you do not master the skill of the spear, it will be impossible to study it. In WAP, this is one of the rare long-range skills. It was a meteor shower, which means only one thing. It's all due to a metastatic stone. He chased the guy, drawing blows towards him. Therefore, Ryuki decided to escape in English. People around couldn't believe it was Lindsay, and the guy understood that Cassius even personally came here for him. But it wasn't he who used the meteor shower against the guy. Turning around, Ryuki saw the culprit of his suffering. It was Renell who was approaching and said that it seemed that the no-name was obsessed with him. Isn't the guy's gallery filled with his photos? The love calls didn't stop, so he couldn't just sit at home. Renell knew that no-name wanted to cause him trouble. Yuguan felt the master's heartbeat quicken, but the guy had imagined that moment many times. But the guy decided to ask Renell one question. Did he recognize him? The guy replied that he didn't remember him, but it was clear that he was trying to get his attention. He came here to see if he would remember the no-name, but he didn't. Ryuki was angry because how can you not remember someone whose life you destroyed? Then Renell suddenly began to remember, straining his head. And then he pretended to say that he didn't remember this. And what should he do now? He began to mockingly ask if Ryuki was upset and disappointed. Did he really think that if he behaved like this, Renell's heart would skip a beat? As a result, the guy only tried to blame others for his misfortune. However, Renell had already come a long way here, so he asked the guy not to disappoint him. He, taking out a weapon, said not to worry about it because he did not need anyone's condescension. So the two players stood opposite each other, about to attack. Renell decided to attack first and activated his weapon. Ryuki knew it would be a tough fight, but he was already preparing to defend himself. But suddenly, Renell suddenly rushed forward. It was just incredible speed. It caused a very strong explosion. Renell, having finished the attack, smiled at what he saw. No-Name was able to dodge, but Renell was determined to destroy him. Ryuki himself was shocked by the power of Renell. But before he had time to come to his senses, the enemy launched his next attack. The guy had no choice but to defend himself. He couldn't even catch the moment to parry due to the speed of a normal attack. He could only manage to block attacks, and not this time. And when Ryuki decided to get up, he suddenly heard that Renell had changed his mind. This is a little entertainment for him because now games have become a place for mining magic stones. But not everyone knows how to truly have fun, and the opponent's weakness allows us to evaluate his abilities. According to Renell, Ryuki was very weak. Well, he was definitely hiding something. Renell wanted the guy to entertain him at least a little. Moreover, the no-name has a chance to get a high score by defending against his Star Strike attack. This skill was very strong, and Renell decided to use it. He hit the guy with his sword and created an explosion effect. Ryuki even felt like his wrist was broken, but he still somehow managed to block Renell's attack. And now it was his turn to attack, and Ryuki used the Holy Sword and parry skill. So he was able to get a small chance, and he couldn't miss it. But the guy didn't even notice how Renell approached him with lightning speed. Having lost his balance, he immediately attacked, throwing the enemy aside again. His attack was clearly stronger and faster than the Dark Knight's. Renell noticed that the parry skill is not in WAP, and the guy uses mixed things. Then Renell decided to play with him a little more, wishing him not to break. And then he attacked again, making sure that the parry worked. Although the skill helped Ryuki dodge, the enemy's transitions were too fast. Most likely, this is the effect of Renell's weapon from a material already familiar to the guy. He used it when she was an analyst, and Renell attacked faster and faster. A unique item, a star spear, increased speed with each attack. Even intuition and parry did not help here. There was no way out, and we had to act now. But then the guy felt a sharp pain and his eyes widened. Renell amazed him, calling him a disappointment because another 3 seconds, and the no-name would have broken the record. After all, the guy wasn't so good that Renell would remember him. But at least he had a little fun before delivering the final blow. In principle, this is the end, and Renell advised to stop provoking him in such ways. Even if a no-name wants to die, he cannot do so here. Just like the village where he fought Cassius, this is also a forbidden play area. No matter how you look at it, there is not a single person here, only ruins. And it is strange that the system recognizes it as a village. In any case, Renell could not leave the game and decided to ask what kind of power Ryuki has. But he coughed and tried to get up. And then he replied that he had better ask Cynthia. Hearing this name, Renell seemed to go crazy. He ran up to Ryuki, grabbed him by the collar, and asked if he knew where this girl was. This reaction surprised Ryuki very much. He smiled and asked if Renell had also been betrayed. He got angry and told the guy to lay out everything he knew. But he only noticed that this was the first time his intuition was screaming so loudly. Renell suddenly took out a small blinding bomb and asked again, "Where is this girl?" Suddenly a very bright light appeared, blinding him. Recoiling, Renell said that the guy surprised him, but this is also trash. But Ryuki smiled because of the thought that someone had taken advantage of Renell and was going to beat the stupidity out of him. He doesn't need anyone else's help for this, but Renell advised the guy not to regret that he did not ask for mercy. He was about to attack again when suddenly Ryuki said that this time, Renell would never forget him. After all, until this moment he had not fought even at 50%. This surprised both Renell and the system. Renell chuckled, surprised that the guy had the time to say such a thing. The system only wished the master not to regret it. But Ryuki has long said goodbye to these useless emotions. Renell found this funny and he sharply attacked. Ryuki decided to use his intuition and buy some time. He needs to read the enemy's attack so that he can attack himself. But then the guy missed one attack and Renell struck. It was unexpected that he decided to attack like this at such a moment. Then Renell's sword was right next to Ryuki's face. The guy managed to dodge at the last moment, but his hand was injured. Renell suddenly said that he was glad that they were in the restricted area. Even though Ryuki had gotten to this point, it was all over too quickly. If they were in a different place, everything would be different. But this is the perfect place for a duel. Suddenly Ryuki spoke up, ordering the enemy to be silent. He will silence this fool right now by attacking from behind. But Renell only smiled at this pathetic attempt. After all, it was impossible to defeat his no-name. Renell easily repelled the attack and even sent a gift in return. He used a first-class skill, Meteor Shower. He became a critical point for Ryuki. Renell mockingly asked, "Is this really 100% power? Or did he just think the guild ace could be trolled? Let Ryuki show his arrogance and take proper revenge if he considers it necessary." But he barely got up, and for Renell it became boring. Out of anger and a bummer of fun, he grabbed Ryuki by the collar, and then hit it, sending Ryuki flying into the sky. It was an ignominious end for him, especially after the meteor shower was activated, after which Renell additionally used a flash of light that hit the enemy, after which Ryuki fell down with great force. Renell thought it was the end, but then he saw his brother's message. He ordered his brother to return to the guild since he had been away for a long time. Renell knew that he would get a punch, but his departure angered Ryuki more. His attacks could not penetrate Renell's armor, and from this pain and shock, if it were real, the guy would have died. The brain can also die, and this is not a problem that can be solved by the power of the spirit. Kugan said that sensitivity adjustment only controls sensation, so he set the threshold to 50% of the minimum value. Since the master decided to enjoy the pain, the system could remove it, but he had no other choice. There's no other way but to constantly collide with each other. Seeing the guy get up, Renell decided to go back and make fun of him. But then Ryuki said that Renell was simply afraid, which shocked the guild leader. But Ryuki talked about Harold's message and then added that Renell was just a pawn. Or did he decide to come here himself without orders? Speaking of Gabriel's anger and Renell's anger, the guy picked up some kind of rusty dagger. Renell considered this to be boring, blaming it all on Ryuki's desperation. But then suddenly I felt a cut on my neck. Ryuki smiled, saying that Renell had let his guard down, but it was just a scratch, and Renell was already screaming. But if this is the first time with him, then Ryuki even congratulated him because now he felt real pain. After all, Ryuki's attacks do not obey the rules of this world, and the pain from them does not decrease. This angered Renell and made Ryuki laugh because he still has many such gifts. So he even told Renell to come and attack. Renell was at his limit and began to attack with all his anger. But Ryuki was just waiting for this, attacking in response. He read the attacks of Renell, who thought that the guy was already too wounded to attack like that. But Ryuki, while he was an analyst, fully studied Renell's tactics to improve his skills. And now he found out that Renell had never experienced such pain. His only mistake is loss of concentration. Therefore now was the time to finish the battle. But then Renell used the skill of Supersonic Sonic, Super Strong Knuckles, Double Attack, and 7 stars. These are awakened techniques that he only used when hunting banshees. But Ryuki was just waiting for Renell to use all his special skills. All that remains is to dodge and stay away from the PK-restricted area. In such an open area, it was very easy to do. But Renell rushed after the guy thinking that he was running from him. But then a wooden doll and an old gear suddenly flew in toward Renell. Ryuki realized that if he could not avoid the attack, then he needed to reduce the damage of Renell's attack. Therefore, Ryuki directed all his trinkets at him, but Renell only became angry. His attacks definitely couldn't be stopped by such nonsense. As a result, Renell's spear almost caught the back of the fleeing Ryuki, and suddenly there was an explosion from such a contact. These were Renell's strongest attacks because the no-name finished him off. He probably wanted to avoid a direct hit, but now he is lying on the ground. But for Ryuki, this was actually his chance. He grabbed the spear, causing Renell's indignation. He complained about the blood-stained weapons, but Ryuki wanted to show something interesting. He pulled his first SSR that day, after which Serial experimented with feathers. In the video, he cheated by calling it a skill, but in fact it is not an item or a skill. Renell also couldn't understand what was happening. He didn't understand why his spear was glowing. Ryuki used the SSR system and removed the item from the world. The spear seemed to evaporate from the hands of both players. Renell asked in hysterics where his star spear was. It even disappeared from inventory, but this shouldn't happen in WAP. Renell suggested that this is a hallucination skill. No Name must have used some kind of trick. But before he had time to think, he received a bullet in the shoulder from a sword pistol. Ryuki aimed for the heart, but Renell had a good reaction, as expected from an ace. Then Renell shouted, "What did the guy do with his rare weapon?" Ryuki said that Renell apparently doesn't realize his situation. The weapon he was proud of is no longer in this world, and its data has been erased. This is the concept of removing SSR rank, and you only need to touch the target for 5 seconds. Renell did not know such tricks, but still wanted to win by taking out the second spear. He said that he had had enough, but Ryuki smiled and began to run away. Renell rushed after the guy, threatening to make a cutlet out of him. He called names and shouted curses after the guy, but then he saw the light. A moment later, an explosion was heard behind Ryuki. Renell could not understand what it was, but then a bright object struck his chest. Ryuki advised the enemy not to make unnecessary movements, because he planted a bunch of mines in this place. Moreover, he specifically lured Renell here. Did he really think that Ryuki didn't know about this place? This greatly angered Renell, who found himself helpless. Ryuki could not allow himself to be destroyed, and calculated everything from the very beginning. And he knows about the playground of Lindsay's scum like Renell. Ryuki assumed that he would bring him here, so he prepared a gift. And since everything worked, now he will play with Renell. He clenched his teeth in anger but did not answer, and then he rushed towards the guy, telling him not to dare talk to him like that. But suddenly the ground exploded, creating a shock wave. Because of the dust, Renell could not see anything, but it was difficult to move. However, after picking up his spear, Renell attacked Ryuki a second time. But then bewilderment appeared in his eyes. In the dust, he did not pierce Ryuki, but only a human skull. Then Renell tried to stick out his spear, but did not have time. Ryuki started counting down and used the removal trick again. Renell's spear disappeared into the playing space again. Renell was surprised again, but then a gun was pointed at him. Without hesitation, Ryuki fired, hitting the target and knocking it back. Grabbing his eye, Renell shouted that he would take revenge for this. But now I could no longer fight and decided to log out of the system. However, he did not succeed, as Yuguan blocked the exit. The next second, a sword stabbed into the angry and frightened guy. It was Ryuki who said that it was shameful for the guild ace Lindsay to run away. Renell didn't understand why he couldn't leave the game, but Ryuki pinned him to the ground, and then asked again if he remembered Lindsay's guild analyst named Ryuki. But Renell replied that this information was too meaningless for him to remember. Then the guy replied that Renell would no longer be able to be a player. One player only has one account, and if you lose your account, you won't be able to get it again. So Ryuki asked himself, could the delete skill destroy account data? He will make Renell remember him well no matter how much he resists. And when the guy started counting down, the enemy asked him to stop. But Ryuki, as if reveling in Renell's helplessness, continued to count. The same one recalled with reproach his brother's order to collect information about RUI-7-0-17. He told Renell to proceed with caution, citing a bad feeling. But he did not listen to his brother and asked him to stop lecturing him. But now he clearly heard the number 1 and then Nero. Renell shouted for the last time to the guy to stop, but it was too late. He, like his weapon, disappeared from the game along with his account forever. Standing on his feet, the master listened to the system's congratulations. She asked if that was all, but Ryuki clenched his teeth. And then he replied that there were 1 or even 2 more people who needed to be dealt with. And one of them is Gabriel Darius, and the second is the one who was watching the guy from the bushes. He had his own motives when he pulled out his dagger. And then when Ryuki had his back turned, he attacked from behind. The dagger flew straight at the guy who did not expect this. He only had time to notice his wound from it when suddenly the world was distorted. It was a teleportation trap in space or something more complex. But then the guy heard a voice that was unfamiliar to him. The guy who came out of the portal said that they had not seen each other for a long time. And then he introduced himself as Arsha from the Grace Guild, who made the top record in the dungeon. In theory, this was their first meeting, but for some reason the guy couldn't relax. Then the voice said that Archa was his new name, but before his name was different. Perhaps that name is more familiar to the guy. Taking off her hood, the girl said that she thought that she and Ryuki would never see each other again. The girl's face immediately appeared in my memories. Her sweet and deceptive smile was before my eyes for a long time, just like the sad, despised look at their last meeting. It was her, that same Cynthia, just the memory of her cut Ryuki's heart. The girl said that her name used to be different. But Ryuki didn't care at all. He didn't care about Cynthia's real name. She set him up, because of which the guy was expelled and made a no-name. He had lost everything, and now Cynthia appeared in front of him. And Ryuki didn't even want to know the reason, but only thought that Cynthia should die. Cynthia replied that she followed Ryuki and never thought that he would become a player. But Ryuki replied that she and Renell were Lindsay's trash, with whom the guy lived with thoughts of revenge all this time. If he did not have this goal, he would have already died as everyone wanted. Let Cynthia better tell why she appeared here while Ryuki was holding back the desire to destroy her. Cynthia said that Ryuki had changed a lot, but advised him to forget the past and stop taking revenge on the guild. Hearing this in the girl's calm tone, Ryuki was taken aback. Stancha added that Lindsay would not touch him if he calmed down, and it would be better for the guy to think about his family. She just found out today that Ryuki's mother died, so she apologized to him. But it was so insipid and not sincere that the guy's face was distorted with anger. He took the hilt of the sword and said that if Cynthia wanted to be destroyed, then he would arrange it. Moreover, he will do it right now by attacking her. But Cynthia didn't even move from the impending attack. And at the last moment, the guy's blade reached the girl. But he didn't have time to wound, as she skillfully made sure. She then landed firmly on her feet and began to run towards the dagger. The guy thought that there was some secret in this weapon. Cynthia was almost approaching her goal and extended her hand. But then her dagger was intercepted by Ryuki's hand. And then the guy himself, who was behind, decided to attack. The girl did not have time to dodge and her head flew to the side, but Ryuki told her not to even think that this was the end. Previously, he had not imagined that the task would be more difficult. But how surprised he was when Cynthia's head began to disappear like a hologram. Cynthia herself suddenly revived and stood up, saying that she did not want to fight Ryuki because defeating Renell would definitely mean something. Therefore, Cynthia wanted to end this today, but Ryuki was against it. Cynthia said she didn't have time and didn't expect the guy to beat Renell. Suddenly, Yuguan warned the master that this was a lie, since a lot of data had somehow been transmitted through the dagger. Even though they have been criticized for all sorts of insults such as bugs and cheats, they create bugs themselves. Ryuki didn't care about the details, only that he couldn't destroy Cynthia now. But then the girl suddenly said that her goal was to destroy Lindsay. And she doubts that Ryuki will be able to cope with Renell when he comes to life. But the guy didn't care what awaited him in the future, but he would not stop taking revenge. Renell will never appear in the Labyrinth again anyway, because Ryuki deleted his account and he even cried. Cynthia, in horror, wanted to ask how this happened, but the guy ordered her to remain silent, threatening to do the same to her. And suddenly the reality Cynthia had created dissolved. Ryuki found himself back in the village and accepted that he had failed. In addition, Cynthia had a dagger known to him, and if not for the peculiarity of the contract, then the guy would be better off avoiding it. Moreover, even touching it could be dangerous. But Ryuki did not feel any discomfort, so he decided to gather more information about it. He should find an ally, but for now he could ask Yuguan. The system then completed reverse data discovery and completed the connection. So Ryuki was able to contact the creator of the mod and talk to him. The first thing the guy said was that he knew that the black market mod he installed had hacked his vision. So the creator was watching the guy, but since he noticed, it would be better to close access. But Ryuki said that it was useless since Renell could no longer log out of the system. Therefore, the creator is also already at a dead end, but the guy had no evil intentions towards him. But the creator didn't care about that. He didn't like that Ryuki wanted to control him. But the guy said that he could earn his forgiveness if he showed his face. Then the creator said to come to Yarazuya tomorrow evening, and if the guy is not there, the creator will delete all his data. But for now, he wanted to ask one question instead. Why did the guy's signal disappear during the battle with Renell? Ryuki realized that only Cynthia had the ability to hide, who had a very dangerous bug and should be destroyed as soon as possible. Then Ryuki got angry and answered the creator that if he doesn't want to be in Renell's place, then he should keep his mouth shut. So Ryuki was able to put the impudent man in his place, but still came to the shop in the evening. But the creator was not there. Only Zotanko, with whom the offended Ryuko decided to make a deal. But Tanko said that the creator of the mod is already here. Ryuko was in no mood to joke and threateningly ordered the merchant to reveal all the secrets. But then a thin voice was heard announcing its presence. Suddenly a small teddy bear came out from behind the counter and introduced himself as the creator of the mods. Ryuki angrily grabbed and squeezed the toy, but it said that they needed to start over. But the guy continued to squeeze the bear and he started screaming that he would break. Ryuki said that it wouldn't come to that when he suddenly saw Tanko crumpled on the table. The guy didn't understand what happened, but Tanko said that it was faster to show than to explain. Suddenly, the bear introduced himself as the creator of the mod, a man named Suzuki5555, and earlier Tenko had spoken with the guy. Ryuki realized that the bear's voice and style of speech had changed, but he didn't know who was behind it. The system said that this is exactly the same creature, because you can programmatically control your personality. To do this, you can use several variations of your body. But why then did the creator bother so much with his personality? Mishka replied that the visitor was insightful, but first decided to congratulate the guy on his victory over Renell and ask what kind of ability it was. Ryuki replied that he did not have to tell everything. Let the creator reveal his true identity first. But the bear said that he had already shown everything and advised the guy to hide the removal skill, but he replied that it was too late. Here Yuguan said that the editing of the video of the fight with Renell was ready, and it was not cut off. The bear shouted that Ryuki was crazy because now Lindsay would destroy him with all her might. But this is exactly what Ryuki wanted, because this is how they admit that they are afraid of the no-names whom they look down on. Mishka said that this makes sense, but the guy's already at gunpoint. Then the bear fell and said that he didn't want to talk about it. And Tanko, who appeared behind him, said that for Suzuki, questions not related to his activities were too troublesome. And then he snapped his fingers and offered to watch a live video with a radius of 100 meters. Very useful thing for identifying people who were targeting this store. So it became clear that at a distance of 47 meters, there were people from the Black Mamba. The guy thought that they wanted to attack, but Tanko replied that it was just bait. The real employers are most likely guys with iron blood, a big organization making money from the Red Lantern District, but it's unlikely they're dealing with Lindsay. Their boss has been out of the game for a long time due to an accident, and Lindsay may have been involved. Therefore, it is stupid to join forces with them, but Ryuki asked how this relates to the identity of the creator. Then Tanko revealed a secret passage and said that Ryuki was being watched and it was better for them to talk there. The guy no longer cared what kind of body the creator used because he needed a partner in his person. For now, they entered the sewer canal connecting the store and the central area. The system analyzed everything and said that there was no danger. And then the guy and Tanko entered a room with a bunch of human prosthetics where they were collected and sold. Although it was creepy, Ryuko was not interested in such things. He only asked what was the best name for the creator. Tanko replied that Suzuki555 is better when he is a hacker, and realized that words cannot convey the whole essence. In any case, Suzuki decided to show who he really is before the deal. But he only had information that his name was anonymous. He was female and between 20 and 30 approximately. Ryuki didn't understand. Does Suzuki really not know who he is? Or does he already have schizophrenia from his prosthetics? Then Suzuki asked if the guy knew about the Boeing 707 explosion. People are sure that it was a plane crash in which no one survived. But miraculously, one person survived, but he was a piece of coal, unable to speak or identify himself. He was split into pieces in a research lab, and some crazy guy fitted him with a prosthetic. The system was horrified by the cruelty of people, but Ryuki realized that Suzuki was the survivor. But he said that it was most likely of Ashira. And at the moment of the fall, all the memories were mixed up. He doesn't know if the soul is the victim's or someone else's, but now Suzuki has skillfully controlled all the personalities. Ryuki believed Suzuki this time and asked what kind of deal he was going to make. Then Suzuki took out some kind of notebook and threw it to the guy. He caught her and heard that could Ryuki add Suzuki to his revenge? The guy now had information about the guilds of Lindsay and Racha in his hands. And while the guy was dealing with this, the video of the victory over Renell was gaining momentum. Most said the deletion was a scam or the video was fake, supporting Renell. But why then doesn't Renell himself deny the events in the video? Renell himself was actually now drinking away his grief, breaking bottles in anger. Another one flew into the wall when Renell once again saw a notification that there was no information about the account. His score and achievements really disappeared, and he even blamed his brother for it. Now his status as Lindsay's guild ace is lost because of Gabriel. The useless brother ruined his entire future by not recreating the account. Renell begged him for a second chance for himself, but Gabriel couldn't give it to someone who ignored his warning, went to fight alone, and lost his account. Renell made excuses and asked to create a new account for him, promising to listen to his brother from now on. Is it really impossible to steal an account from someone or gain the right to create a new one? But Gabriel could not believe that his brother was speaking such ignorance. And he was ashamed that they were of the same blood. As a rule, there is one account per person, and it is impossible to restore the account. Therefore, Gabriel only said that Renell had to go and asked not to disturb him anymore. But he didn't understand how the no-name became a player then, but the thought that the end was stupid for him was more important. Realizing this, Renell fought off the guards and left his brother's office. He just emotionlessly adjusted his glasses near his nose. And then he ordered Renell to be thrown out of the office, saying that he was tired of listening to whining. The same one, standing up, began to lament, saying that everyone was wrong. But then a polite male voice came from behind him, calling Renell Darius. He answered irritably that if the guy is a beggar, and even if this is not the case, then he has no time for it. Then the voice laughed and replied that the only beggar here was Renell, and then handed him a photo and said that he wanted to help. It seemed to him that Renell would need their strength in finding the man with the photo. So why shouldn't the guy listen to his interesting story? And while Renell was studying the stranger, Ryuki learned from the manual that Lindsay was deliberately delaying progress in the world of fantasy. In return, the game developer Radia provides special conditions for Lindsay. Yuguan said that with such developers and administrators, it is not surprising that the game is such a mess. Tanko replied that this was a secret pact between Lindsay Guild and Racha Soft. They want to deliberately stop progress in God's game. Ryuki realized that right now the world was being supported by resources from the Labyrinth. Is it really worth taking on monopolists? But Tanko replied that they once led the frontier in the development of God's game, but now they are just an obstacle to the progress of the world. Suzuki's anger at the company was difficult to understand, but he was the only survivor of the 707 explosion incident. That thing that exploded on the plane back then was a game item from Yggdrasil. Ryuki guessed that Tanko was almost sure that Ratia Soft was behind this explosion. If they go after Lindsay, they will go against Rathia too, but even their resources are slowly drying up. Society is stable now, but in 5 to 10 years, Ratia may come up with something new. And those incompetent people will just continue to monopoly the God's game development. God is the reservoir of demons. The main content of WAP remains unconquered. The Lindsay Guild has control and a plan to dominate it. But even Yuguan had a great desire to destroy this plan. Tanko would have supported this idea, but he had a friend's reason for being in this world. Ryuki knew that these were mods, and he also really wanted them. He tested all 13 mouse provided by Wolya, and the disguise mod looked to be useful. Something to think about, but it's a pretty interesting deal, but right now he was interested in one case. Yuguan confirmed that there was record of the Tanko incident, and it is true that only one person survived. However, there is no evidence that Will survived, so this needs to be investigated separately. In the end of the end, it cannot be trusted. And anyway, Will said to go to the back alleys to the district hotel. This place was considered safe, but as soon as the guy climbed out of the hatch, he noticed a strange man sitting on the road. Ryuki thought he was drunk and decided to check how he was feeling. But suddenly the guy noticed something interesting. Yuguan and Ryuki immediately realized that these were digital drugs. And then some voice behind said that they are in trend lately. Moreover, they are easy to find in this pleasure area. Ryuki managed to escape and turn the corner before the strange guys appeared. They were wearing the same clothes as the people near Jushin Square. Ryuki blamed Tanko for everything because he said that this is a safe route, or did he do it on purpose? But one of the strange people grabbed a man on the road and rhetorically asked whether the effect of this drug was impressive. And then he pushed the stranger aside and he fell, after which he stood up and ordered his guys to drag the poor fellow away. And then he asked if they had really lost their goal. The subordinate began to apologize, but the boss said that Volya is always too careful. Moreover, the client asked for Now to just watch him, so you just need to monitor the area. Although on the other hand, observation is unlikely to help. So subordinates must follow all orders. They must make an effort, otherwise the consequences will be dire. Yuguan, watching everything with the master, suddenly said that Will really didn't set a trap for them. But the guy told the system to be silent, not wanting to get into trouble. And then he ordered Yuguan to lead him through the most populated route. So he soon arrived at his destination. All that was left was to pull the handle and enter. The guy thought about it, still not believing in the generosity of Tanko or Volya. Entering the room, he saw a clean bed and a small room. Happy that it was for him, Ryuki collapsed onto the clean sheets. He spent weeks in the Labyrinth and didn't even remember when he was in the real world. The guy lay there relaxing for the first time in a long time. But then he felt someone's presence in the room. At that very second, someone's sword pierced his bed. Ryuki managed to rush to the side at the last moment using a sprint. Now even in this place he was not safe. Ryuki pulled out his short knife at the last moment and struck the attacker. He rushed to the other side of the room, escaping from the blow. But it was amazing. The enemy seemed to teleport to the window. The attacker just used a special skill, an item from Yggdrasil. But Ryuki could not let him leave and jumped after the enemy through the window. Having successfully landed, Ryuki began to follow the red tracks. Yuguan said that the enemy uses invisibility and presence concealing, items converted into reality. Without intuition, Ryuki would not have even noticed this, but the system also warned that there were no traps. The tracks lead around the corner and the guy followed them. Having driven the enemy into a dead end, he shouted that it was useless to run. He turned around and Ryuki asked who sent him to destroy the guy. But the enemy did not respond, raising his sword up and attacking Ryuki in response. He managed to dodge at the last moment, sensing that the enemy was dangerous. He was able to create an entire wall cutting with his weapon. Yuguan was impressed by this because the weapon could cut everything in its path in one blow. But Ryuki replied that the skill of the enemy's sword does not quite coordinate with its power. This means that this is not his main weapon and he will not allow him to escape, so he grabbed him by the hand. And then he hit him with a sword, saying that he would first see what kind of weapon it was. The sword fell from the hands of the stranger as he tried to escape. Then the weapon's effect wore off, as did its invisibility, revealing the attacker's face. But Ryuki didn't really need this because he mockingly said that the so-called former guild ace was trying to act like a killer. It is not clear whether Renell, who was wounded in the arm, was ashamed of this, but he was definitely angry. He shouted curses at the hated Ryuki. He was ready to destroy the guy and rushed for his sword, but before he could take it, he received a blow. Ryuki threw Renell several meters to the side, and then he picked up his sword and asked, "Isn't this an item of Yggdrasil? Then where did Renell get it?" He could use the sword's capabilities as the owner, but Ryuki said that such rubbish was enough for Renell. He looked at Ryuki angrily, calling him a bastard. And then he stood up and, to Ryuki's surprise, simply ran away. But the guy didn't want to miss this opportunity and rushed after him. Renell was furious, but thought he still had a way to win. This monster Ryuki will still dance to his tune. Running out into a crowded place, Renell realized that it didn't matter how strong this guy was because he was still a no-name. People on the street immediately recognized Renell and noticed blood on his hand. And when they saw Ryuki with a sword in his hands, they were surprised at this object. And then everyone recognized the famous RYU 70117 from the video. Everyone knew about his victory over Renell in the game, but did not expect that they would fight in real life. Renell shouted, "How dare a no-name threaten the Golden Boss? This is a crime committed in front of a bunch of witnesses." His excuses won't carry any legal weight, so what is he going to do now? Then Ryuki threw the sword on the ground and suddenly said to arrest him. This surprised Renell, but Ryuki said that it was strange that the Golden Boss attacked a no-name, which means it was self-defense on Ryuki's part. And if Renell destroys him, then he will be innocent. If he can do it, of course. But Renell understood that he would not do anything in front of witnesses. But Renell had options, but Ryuki's behavior was as if he was up to something. But Renell, in front of all these cameras, could pay for humiliation in the game. And then, having destroyed Ryuki, he will again announce his resurrection. So Renell took the sword and attacked Ryuki. But this attack looked pathetic, so Ryuki didn't even feel it. This angered Renell even more, and he attacked again, ordering his opponent to shut up. Blow after blow was thrown, but Ryuki dodged with ease. He said that Renell was simply not used to the sword, so all of his attacks are terrible. He definitely handled the spear better. What a pity that he is no longer there. Renell shouted angrily at how much Ryuki could dodge, but Ryuki hit him with all his might. And then he said that it would be better for Renell to call his brother for help. And then suddenly remembered that the same one kicked him out. Renell stared at the guy with red eyes from anger. And then, shouting curses, he rushed to the attack. But each of his attacks flew past Ryuki. Renell was serious, and he was determined to destroy him. And suddenly there was another explosion, and Ryuki had to dodge. Renell immediately realized that this was his chance. Having attacked the guy, he decided not to let him mock him like that anymore. He decided to end the fight, but Renell's sword blade and Ryuki's short knife crossed. Ryuki said that Renell went too far. He not only turned the city into a mess, but also attacked innocent citizens. No matter how strong and influential is the boss, it cannot be out of sight. Renell could not understand what kind of nonsense his opponent was talking about, but suddenly he felt something strange. The space around changed, and there were a lot of people around. They all screamed in fear and helped the wounded escape, calling an ambulance. They called doctors and police, but everything around was destroyed. Renell then realized that Ryuki had blurred his vision, so he didn't notice anything. He shouted, asking when this horror began. But the most dangerous thing was that everyone saw it. People angrily said that after this, Renell would definitely be finished. They began to understand why Renell had been kicked out. Camera flashes were everywhere. Renell, in confusion, asked to stop, but no one heard him. Ryuki said from the rubble that Renell now cannot escape media attention. Angry, Renell began to swing his sword even more, destroying everything around him. People began to run away in fear, thinking that this crazy man would attack again. Renell immediately began to make excuses and say that he only wanted to attack that guy. But in the eyes of the public, it was not he who became the enemy, but only Renell. And then Ryuki's voice was heard again, who decided to congratulate the enemy. His useless and easy life ended at that moment. Did he still not remember the name of that same no-name? And then memories of how he framed Ryuki popped into Renell's head. Then he also congratulated Ryuki that his useless life had come to an end. And only at that moment did he remember the name he hated, Ryuki. At this time, all news channels were talking about the unrest in the city. Renell Darius, who was arrested as a suspect, claimed that it was a conspiracy Ryu 7017. But the police concluded, based on analysis of the data, that this was his solo act. The whereasing of Ryu 7017, who was seen together, remains unclear, but fortunately, there were no deaths. This was all reported to the guild leader, Lindsay, and the conference was mentioned. He was furious and said that this was too much, after which he gave the order to mobilize the entire guild in Lindsay. They will not skimp on any means or methods even if it paralyzes the entire world of Phantasm. They will find this mysterious no-name no matter what. Gabriel was determined to take control of everything. At the guild press conference, they had already discussed this problem. Gabriel said that before the Renell incident, Darius was expelled and was not a member of the guild. Therefore, the leader stated that this incident has no connection with the Lindsay Guild at all. Then the reporters asked if it was true that Renell's account was deleted in the video, and why Lindsay's guild attacked Ryudo 17. Gabriel replied that they had investigated the guy. It has the power to forkily delete data from game mazes, and his power can be used not only in the world of fantasy, but also in other game labyrinths. Based on this, the guild believes that Ryudo 17's very existence is a risk factor, and they are using all of the guild's resources to border him. The Lindsay Guild will protect the fantasy world from criminals like Ryu 7077. At this point, the broadcast was interrupted and the video conference ended. People wrote disappointed comments under the video because the guild did not catch the criminal in a month. Moreover, some believed that this was all due to the exclusion of Renell, who has a large fan base. People were afraid that now this no-name would run away, but that would be illogical. The reputation of the Lindsay Guild has fallen, which could not help but anger its members. Laguna couldn't believe that her guild was doing nothing. But then her indignation at the video was interrupted by Visk, her friend, and another member of the guild. She cleared another dungeon, complaining that the guild gave a lot of tasks. And this whole situation, according to Visk, did not happen because of Renell, but an increase in the number of closed game mazes. Renell was just not careful with the misspelling of the name Ryu or whatever his name is. Is there any sense in throwing their entire workforce to catch this guy, who is in fact a bug? Suddenly Laguna exclaimed that this Ryu 7017 is on another level and his existence challenges common sense. Then Vix calmly asked, "Where is this incredible guy right now? He fights the guild and forces everyone to chase him, and now he is hiding again, making the guild chase their own tails." So far, he's not doing anything wrong, but Laguna didn't agree with this when suddenly something distracted her. She saw that the same guy had released a new video on the platform. And while everyone was watching this, Gabriel held a meeting with the head of Racha at their headquarters. The head was clearly unhappy that Lindsay had not caught the intruder. Gabriel apologized, but the head didn't need it because he even gave the go-ahead to deal with the guy in reality and not in the game. But he still easily fooled the guild around his finger. General Director of Racha Soft Platinum rank, Duke Stavero, believed that Gabriel overestimated his capabilities. He heard that their resource extraction in the fantasic world is continually decreasing, so the management was very disappointed with him. This oppression of the old man irritated Gabriel, but he only had the right to apologize. But then, Dick added that it would be inconvenient if the world of fantasy crashed right now until one thing was completed. Dick decided to present the project to Gabriel, a masterpiece that will change the entire gaming industry. Gabriel leaned over and was about to investigate when suddenly he received a notification. It was a notification about the release of a new no-name video. The notification went out to everyone, and people wondered why this guy hadn't escaped yet. It's strange that Lindsay's guild didn't detain him, and he's still freely waving at the screen to say hello to the audience. Ryuki said that he watched a recent video about the Lindsay Guild emergency press conference. The guild leader called Ryuki a public enemy, but he is the enemy of the Phantasm, which will soon fall apart because of him. Today's video is just a preview of his further actions, the Knock Knock Builder game. It was previously popular, but was abandoned due to errors and complexity. This is usually how some game labyrinths end up. But this cannot happen just like that. So when do these labyrinths end? First, when the resources in the game, mazes are exhausted or are transferred to other mazes. But the world of Phantasm cannot be extended indefinitely, so exhausted labyrinths are turned off. Second is when the number of users falls, and if the number of players falls below a certain threshold, it will automatically disconnect. This game, where Ryuki is now, was closed just like that. And finally, the third case, a virus. Here it was the Knock Knock Cube God, the entity that creates cubes, and therefore this place became a trash game. But now Ryuki decided to fix this by starting to take out weapons. He will destroy this cube god to restore the game and film it. Visk looked at the monitor screen in delight, not believing what was happening now. Laguna noticed in the guy's hands the weapon that he used in the world of fantasy in the video. How he uses the same weapon in another game. Maze is a mystery, because the maze system limits it. However, on the screen a lot of cubes were already flying at the guy. He easily cut them, moving forward. Cube soldiers are nothing special. There are many, but they are weak and have simple attack patterns. However, the reason this maze game failed is not this, and the fact is that there were endless attacks that destroyed everything and made construction and craft impossible. This is all because of bad difficulty settings, but it's interesting. What happens if you destroy the root cause of such attacks? That's what Ryuki did, pouncing on the cube and piercing it. This was the ultimate method to end the game because there was a flaw in the system. With him, it is impossible to maintain the game and save the maze, but now Ryuki used the delete and destroyed the system bug. The cube screamed, sparkled, and began to disappear into the space of the game. It soon disintegrated into many small, useless cubes. Now when Ryuki has removed Thump Builder Thump, this game maze will be automatically turned off. Now everything has fallen into place, and the cubes have become small. Visk couldn't believe that this guy actually destroyed the game maze himself. Laguna realized that the skill that removed Linful's weapons and avatar can influence the game maze itself. At this time, Ryuki thanked all his viewers from the screen and said goodbye. He wanted to correct the stupid some high policy person did. To those who claimed that if the world of Phantasm disappears, the world will collapse, but the world will remain. The only thing that will collapse is Ratia Soft, saturated with greed and laziness and Lindsay's guild. And Ryuki is not an enemy of society, but an enemy only of these guys listed above. The video caused a furor, but it was necessary to continue clearing dungeons, and the goal was the Illusion Dungeon. In it, members of the Lindsay Guild were looking for Ryuko, whose photo was held by the leader of the team. He pointed to the photo and ordered to go to the dungeon. The guild members were outraged and said that they were already here, suffering every month. Why do they have to suffer just because some guy named Ryuki the guild don't like? Discontent grew more and more every day. The captain said that this was an order and ordered everyone to leave their weapons during the search. One of the soldiers began to draw his sword, and with it, he changed. The veil began to fall off him, and all the other members of the squad turned in fear in his direction. They recognized 7017, whom they had been looking for all this time, but he only mocked. He decided to try out his new skills to warm up for the dungeon. Therefore, Ryuki easily began to attack his opponents with a new skill. It was the SR Sword Draws LV Bite 1 skill, increasing attack speed by 50%. After several attacks, the guy decided to change weapons. Using the SR skill Soul Severing Bluroi, he attacked again. This is a weapon that destroys souls and destroys several enemies at once. Then another soldier attacked Ryuki from behind. However, the guy sensed his approach and turned around sharply. He attacked the enemy, destroying him with one blow. Everyone around them panicked because they had not seen such skills in WAP. Moreover, the guy has not been in the world of Phantasm for a long time. A month ago, he left the world for a long time. Now, Lindsay's guild definitely had to intervene, so he came to Game Labyrinth. Ryuki wanted to check if it is really possible to destroy the game maze and acquire new skills and items. So the guy ended up in a labyrinth. Heavenly Dragon Blade Online. Produced by Ratchasoft and Genre, Martial Arts. Ryuki destroyed all his opponents and said that he needed new power. This power is needed to defeat Rithia and Lindsay. But defeating the boss turned out to be not so easy. Ryuki lost at this game over and over again. He already thought that constant defeats would not allow him to win. But he was still indignant, which made the final boss, the sword god, laugh. He called Ryuki quite stubborn, but decided to show him all his power. The guy was incredibly angry that he couldn't win, even if it's the final boss, if it's so difficult. Of course, nobody will come, and the game will quit. It's a dead maze, so there are no strategy guidelines, but there must be a way to win. Then Yuguan appeared and suggested just spinning a random box and using all the collected RP, but Ryuki irritably once again said that this was for skills. And then an interesting idea came into Ryuki's head. The boss laughed, thinking that Ryuki just didn't know when to stop. Isn't it clear that it's pointless to try again and again? But Ryuki said he heard it so many times that he remembered all the cut. It's time for such an old man to start acting. Otherwise, he's just talking. This greatly angered the boss, who became indignant. How dare some fool who happened to survive insult him? The boss rushed to attack, but Ryuki easily dodged the attack. However, the enemy was fast, and rarely had the guy seen such blows. And then the boss caught up with Ryuki and appeared right behind him. He struck the guy, but he managed to defend himself with his sword. The boss said that Ryuki can't match swords with him. He used the true power of his dragon sword. Then he rushed into the attack, leaving only dust behind him. However, there was an explosion from grenades thrown by Ryuki, which the boss considered cowardly. It's all thanks to those N-rank trinkets. This made the boss more angry, but he couldn't be defeated with these trinkets. Then Ryuki released poison into the air, but the boss was not susceptible to it. However, the guy said that it would work, since it was not poison, and he himself put on a respirator mask. The boss began to smell horribly, and his heightened senses made him cover his nose. It was a gas bomb, but it also couldn't stop the boss. But the guy did not despair and again scattered a bunch of grenades. They all exploded at the same time, so a bright light appeared. The boss got angry and used the Heavenly Dragon Blade, Rising Dragon Impeller Blade. But suddenly some force threw him in the other direction. The boss fell, which delighted the system. But the system itself told the master not to hold back. Grenades, stink bombs, flares, and weapons, or even the most powerful boss could not fight against this. Therefore, with the guild members, Ryuki used the Dragon QI skill, which won in Blade Online. It was an SR Plus skill, Dragon Die skill 9Ju, which improves physical abilities. And then Ryuki entered the dungeon, saying to say hi to Gabriel. In front of him was a boss monster, the spirit of the bloody Tree Liganon. He had the SR skill, Ramit Symphont, level 1, and he had the appearance of a shadow dragon. It was a dragon made from shadows. It grows by eating the shadows of other creatures. Despite its appearance, this is a terrible creature. But with it, all other SSRs and SRSs will also become useful and can be used. But it was time to go to the dungeon. Illusion, a forest saturated with evil, attracting lost souls deeper. For some reason, the system tried to say something, but Ryuki said that he already knew everything. After entering the portal, Ryuki immediately understood why the dungeon was called an illusion. A surprise awaited him there, which he immediately sensed. He already understood what the system wanted to warn him about. However, he still entered the portal and smiled at what was happening. At the entrance stood Gabriel with an entire army of strong guild fighters. The guy grinned and said that he had already fulfilled the conditions and did not enter the game. Then, Why were they persecuting him? Is this all just the return of the legend? Renell Darius? Yuguan said that he expected this since Ryuki blatantly appeared on their territory. But it's a little surprising to see such a huge crowd just to catch one master. The guy noticed that there were really more than 1,000 people, and is this really Lindsay's level? But then Renell handed over some notebook and said that he had a proposal for Ryuki. He grinned and said that good offers don't happen with so many people. But Renell suddenly invited Ryuki to return to the guild. They would cancel his status as an unknown and moreover assign him a gold rank, which is almost impossible to achieve. In the future, they will consider Ryuki as the heir to the Lindsay Guild, which is a very good option. But Ryuki asked in disappointment, are they really offering him to become the leader of the guild when he himself wants to destroy it? His answer should be clear. Let them choke on their gifts. And at that very second, Renell found himself behind Ryuki with a sword in his hands. He attacked the guy, saying at the same time, does he remember the hospital of the general profile of the saint? Where was his mother? Ryuki wondered how Renell knew where his mother was. But then he also added that his mother's death was not natural. But Ryuki got angry, repelling the attack, asking if Renell really thinks he will believe this? But Renell replied that the guy could check it himself because he brought evidence. The skills and items that didn't exist in the original game's maze system are quite intriguing. Therefore, Renell will not fight, but will wait for Ryuki at the top of the tower today. Then, without answering the guy's objections, Renell flew into the air. To get to the top, he will have to go through all these gamers. At the moment, he declared to all members of the Lindsay Guild that the one who destroys Ryuki, he will make the same offer that he made to this guy before. He thought that no matter how strong Ryuki was, it was impossible for one person to defeat 1,000 opponents. Once they win, they will reveal the secret of his power. But before Renell had time to fly far, he saw his gamers scattering to the sides. Ryuki seemed to explode the entire battlefield in front of him. He definitely had some kind of secret weapon, but through the explosions, he turned to Gabriel. Ryuki asked if he was sure of his idea to leave him here alone. And I myself used the S5R system, like a large pistol with a blade for hunting big calls. It was capable of long-distance bombing with energy charging, which mowed down hundreds of players in one hit. But they did not despair, because this is only one player who can be taken in numbers. First, everyone needs to use ranged attacks at the same time. You just need to give him the final blow to become the guild leader later. All the players' powers turned into one big energy ball. Even from afar, his energy felt very powerful. The explosions from the attacks were insanely loud and could be heard everywhere. After them, only clouds of dust remained, and gamers were sure that they had destroyed the target. But when the veil cleared, they saw that there was no one at the scene of the attack. Players assumed that the guy had a return stone and teleported away. But he still couldn't do it that fast, so he had to watch closely. Gabriel, who appeared on the field at that moment, could not believe that this was possible. Ryuki outwitted him this time, but it won't happen again. And Ryuki himself, safe and sound, materialized in another place and said that it was fun. But next time, he will destroy Gabriel along with the tower. He already used too many cool skills for this fight and decided to do a spin. He got the skill SSR Limit Break and SSR, Enchant of the first level. Ryuki was angry that out of the 1,000 tickets he collected in a month, that was all he got. The system said that the master should already be happy with the fact that he has 2 SR. But what is their plan now? Having calmed down, Ryuki replied that they should now prepare for the tower. It was a high-ranking dungeon where a guy would conquer all the records of conquering the dungeon. Lindsay did not act, which caused indignation among users and delight among fans. Ryuki single-handedly cleared the dungeon blue underground labyrinth. It took even the fastest gamer 2 years to reach the tower. This speed was not possible due to alignment restrictions, but a new record was set. This Ryuki simply burst into the game labyrinths and set records there. This time it was the Dawn Mist Prairie dungeon. Viewers began to speculate that Ryuki would be the first to clear the tower after he cleared the Aurora ground. Lindsay's players were following the guy, and RYU 701701 was suddenly spotted in a nearby dungeon. Even players of the older generation admired the fact that the young guy closed the mazes so quickly. Even ordinary inhabitants of the labyrinths began to rebel. They didn't want to bow their heads to gamers anymore. They shouted that they were born here and they would die here. They wanted to drive out the invaders from outside and take back their world. They formed a blood penetration unit and proved that they no longer needed gamers. Tomorrow they wanted to attack the dungeon, starting a rebellion. The old innkeeper looked at it all sadly. All the customers had already left and he was about to close the store, advising the last customer to go home. It was Ryuki in disguise who, over the communication, asked the mod creator with whom he was in contact if there was any new information. He replied that the rebel unit was created by the inhabitants of the game under the leadership of that guy Kugan. They have already challenged the dungeon several times, but now they are confident that they will conquer it. Yuguan added that this is not just recklessness, it is practically suicide. The villagers here have no system, so they cannot level up. And if they die once, they cannot be resurrected. But Ryuki didn't care until he heard that a certain GAS had made contact with the rebels. Garcia contacted the game maze NPC, and it's not a bug. Ryuki said that he had a bad feeling about this and disguised himself again, setting off. He was on his way to the dungeon, Predator's Nest. Ryuki was wondering why those guys from Seofyoldan were gathered here. It turns out they had an ace up their sleeve. Yuguan liked what was happening in the system of this game, but Ryuki replied that thanks to this he was able to sneak in here, disguised as a resident. But it doesn't matter since these people are weaker than gamers. The guy didn't understand how they were planning to fight the huge dungeon monster. A huge scorpion was approaching people, wanting to hit the enemy with its sting. He attacked, scattering a bunch of resistance members. The first wave retreated, so Kugan ordered the second wave to attack. For an NPC, their movements were pretty skilled. But for such monsters, you need to try to attack the gaps in the shell or joints. Otherwise, they cannot be defeated, especially a huge scorpion with powerful armor. Here, Yuguan discovered a pattern identical to the Ga-S Asia dagger. They may be even more trouble than Lindsay's guild. This is not the first time these guys have interfered in their business. At this time, Kugan's army was losing soldiers, asking in panic what they should do. Their comrades were in critical condition. They were destroyed by the scorpion's venom and were hanging on by a thread. Ryuki, watching everything from the shadows, asked Yuguan, what happens when NPCs die? He replied that they are absorbed into Yggdrasil and are reborn in another form like reincarnation. Very rarely, some keep memories of their past life. But before the fight, Kugan gave everyone vials of medicine for the dying, which they needed to drink. After this, the soldier's body began to glow and his mortal wounds healed. For Ryuki, this potion and the strange weapons of these people were a miracle and aroused suspicion. Their aura seemed ominous, and the guy's intuition did not disappoint. The squad members, seeing how quickly their comrade recovered, were glad that they could do the same. However, Kugan found it suspicious that they got such things from a gamer. But it turned out that they can also be kind, and their motives are obvious. Gamers want to subjugate the residents, but they will not sit and wait while they are used because they are users themselves. But they are not pawns to be used, and they will fight. And now, they have finally reached the final monster. This was the final boss of this dungeon, which was huge and scary. His name was Abaddon, and he was angry that his soldiers had died. He has the habit of rugging underground, so the commander ordered to attack as much as possible before this happens. But before they had time to attack, the monster suddenly began to sink underground. Ryuki understood that he needed to analyze the enemy's pattern to exhaust it, and he himself would use his intuition. Then he could choose the perfect time to attack, but the guys could only move and not stand still. Once someone falls into the trap, they are definitely finished. Therefore, Kugan decided to attack first, striking the ground with his sword. He missed, but sensed which direction the monster was moving. And suddenly, and with a loud roar, jumped out of the ground. Realizing that it was all because of Kugan's punch, Ryuki thought it was very cool. But the monster began to surround all the players. He wounded many players with fragments of earth who decided to immediately use the potion. Kugan shouted that he needed to hold out a little longer because victory was close. The captain did his best, putting energy into this blow. Thus, he defeated the enemy, and the inhabitants cleared the dungeon of the dragon's nest. Kugan was happy because they had whitewashed it. A victorious roar rang out among all the remaining residents. But then there was applause, and a mocking man emerged from the shadows. He said it was quite cute, which caught Kugan's attention. He recognized the voice as that of John Doe, who couldn't believe the villagers had made it through. John was a player from the outside world who caused a lot of outrage. Although he helped the residents, they could not trust him because he probably also wanted to use them. John just smiled and said that he congratulated these people on clearing the dungeon. This achievement may give the residents of the game's maze a little pride. But unfortunately, the heroes of this change are not them. Kugan said he doesn't know John's goal, but Seofyoldan is just beginning and they'll be out of here soon. Well, then John grinned and asked if that guy took the black potion. Then he waved his hand, and everyone who drank it fell into convulsions. This potion does not recover people completely, but simply constantly generates error code in the damaged areas. The bug gradually infects the user's body. Their GAES planned this experiment from the very beginning. To see what happens to a person after an injection, a closed space and 50 people are ideal conditions. Kugan, bleeding black liquid, was seething with rage because they were being used again. But John said they were just a few fancy game NPCs. In the last moments, Kugan angrily sent John away, calling him a failure. But he soon fell, and John dragged him to the side. He then opened the panel and started calling the players by numbers. It turned out that all the numbers failed and died. It was almost complete destruction, but some people remained. Kugan was heaving heavy sighs at this time. John took off his hat with happiness. Is this really a success and someone survived? But Kugan had already turned completely black, covered in an evil aura. He suddenly began to rise and shouted to the residents to rise up. Black energy accumulated around the guy. It was everywhere, as if flowing from everything around. John looked at this with pleasure because this specimen began to infect the dungeon. Soon the entire dungeon will be subdued, but suddenly Ryuki appeared behind John. He used the skill SR plus Sunbow YGG of an unknown level of the Yuguan system. John turned around in surprise at being called an outsider, but froze as a knife was pointed at him. Ryuki asked once again what GAES were up to, stopping just wagging their tongues. John asked why he had to reveal his plan, but Ryuki asked to explain the mistake. John then decided to reveal that it began as a Yggdrasil data research. It took a long time, but now they've almost reached the end, and now the final test awaits them. They have long noticed that NPS grow like ordinary people. Moreover, they wanted to be residents and someday get into the real world. John felt that this NPS was serious and could be used. It was then that John suggested they work together, and now the shadow of his body fell on Ryuki's shoulders, and John, dodging attacks, was sure that he would soon destroy him. But Ryuki had his own ace up his sleeve. He used a level 2 intuition skill, and then another grenade materialized in his hand. It flew straight towards John, frightening him with its glow. His flash blinded and angered John, and Ryuki grabbed him by the collar and said that he couldn't be fooled by cheap tricks. And then he asked what this terrible thing was that was devouring the dungeon, and what did it do to the Blood Guild? John laughed, asking if Ryuki had a crush on the NPS. But the guy didn't like that John didn't want to talk, so he decided to take action. John fearfully asked what this guy wanted, but he, without listening to the end, hit him on the ground. Because of this, John was unable to log out. He didn't understand why nothing was working, but the darkness was closing in on him. Ryuki said that he blocked the exit from the system and the enemy cannot escape. Therefore, he ordered him to surrender and answer his questions. But John was silent, and Ryuki raised his sword over him, saying that he looked pathetic. But I myself thought that first-level instinct could identify the source and result of this danger. But then the gasping John was able to shout that something had appeared behind Ryuki. The guy turned around and noticed a strange, dark silhouette from behind. He covered Ryuki's head with his huge hand, but this attack could not hit the agile guy. He jumped away from attacks and explosions, dodging them. Ryuki couldn't understand where these attacks were coming from. They were created by the same guy Kugan, but how was he still alive? Suddenly, one of his attacks overtook John. He tried to cover himself with his hand, but the blow penetrated it like a parasite. The hand began to disappear, and John realized that his body had become infected with a bug. As John disappeared, he promised Ryuki that he would pay Ray for ruining his research today. Ryuki realized that John had escaped, and not just like that, but in the same way as he entered the dungeon, that is, not through the system. But now there is only one problem left, the infected monster Kugan. Now all his attention turned to the guy, but he immediately received a blow to the face. Ryuki immediately attacked, and the monster flew to the side. His head felt like it was split in two, but he was still alive. Ryuki couldn't believe it and didn't understand how he could defeat this creature. Its appearance looked stable, but it seems that inside it there are only bugs and errors. But behind all this was a small child, Kugan, who devoted all his time to training. They told him that he was not fast enough and promised to take the boy from the village if he won. But then this fight was noticed by Kugan's mother, who had been looking for her son since the very morning because he needed to chop wood. But Kugan replied that he no longer does that boring housework. These people from outside promised him if he won the bet, they would take him out of this village. But suddenly a swing of the sword destroyed all the dreams of the little NPS. Apples fell from the hands of the boy's mother because the gamer knocked her out. One of them said that she was just an NPS and the next dungeon clue should be on her necklace. Kugan, stuttering, asked what these people were doing, but they did not pay attention to the boy. And then they answered, does the boy really think that they will take such a dumb NPC like Kugan? He was just being bait to get this necklace, but the boy didn't understand why he would kill because of this. And he would never have understood, because now he is a slave to the black spear, which was in Ryuki's hands along with the antidote. He got everything necessary for the analysis and only a small matter remained. It is necessary to deal with Kugan lying on the ground. Ryuki approached this guy and respectfully told him to say his last wish. Kugan said heavily that he would never forgive gamers. The image of his mother screaming in fear appeared before the guy's eyes. And the last words were the curse of all players in the outside world, after which Kugan gathered all his remaining strength and directed the energy towards Ryuki. To Kugan, he was a gamer like everyone else, but Ryuki defended himself. But without knowing this guy Kugan, he respected him. His desire to change the world was similar to Ryuki's own, and perhaps they would have gotten along. Anyway, Gaius will be destroyed soon, so he will talk about revenge. In the meantime, he wished Kugan to be reborn in a kinder Labyrinth. It was not possible to record this fight due to an error caused by GAES, which the guy clearly underestimated. Who would thought they would be using the Blood Guild as test subjects? And while Ryuki was thinking about this, the mod creator was looking for information about this John. Ryuki knew that it was time for him to get the Phantasm certificate, although he thought about doing it later. Time to reach the peak of the Demon Tower, the finale of the Phantasm world. Ryuki managed to reach her quickly enough, and this dungeon looked like a city. Members of the Lindsay Guild were there as guards, and one of them was Visk. She was unhappy because she didn't like just sitting instead of climbing the tower. Then the girl next to her said that the probability of Ryu-7-0-1-7 becoming a phantasm and appearing in the tower this week is 90%. This girl was a high-ranking member of the Lindsay Guild named Noir. She assumed that Gabriel was nervous after he was found. But Visk asked, since when did their guildmaster start behind So Human? All the information from headquarters is incorrect, and the support is a joke. Noin replied that the Phantasm world is a little unstable right now, but the NPC group, Blood Guild, cleaned the dungeon themselves. And the dungeon completely collapsed because of a bug right after that, and now the players think the NPCs are the cause and haunts them, warning the conflict. In fact, there is evidence that someone interfered with the Blood Guild. But since the data was erased with the dungeon, this could not be confirmed. But the guild is sure that Ryu-70117 is involved in this. This delights many, for example, Laguna, for whom the no-name is almost a god. The techniques in his videos are, of course, impressive, and if only the guild had a player like him, it would be easier. But who entrusted him with such power, as deleting data is unclear. But it is very dangerous. But then another strange guy appeared on the horizon. It was another high-level member of Lindsay's guild, Explosive Sword. He patted Visk on the head, asking, "Who let the children into the tower?" But Visk answered displeasedly that she was not going to look at his stupid face. Then the guy decided to end their rivalry once and for all, and the one who destroys the no-name is the winner. They had already started shouting at each other, but Noir tried to calm her friends down because they were talking too loudly about confidential information. However, all the guild members were losing patience, wondering how long they should wait for this guy. But suddenly, they all received a notification at the same time. It was reported that a new level 47 has been unlocked. But then Visk shouted that it's not about the 47th floor. This notification came to them for a reason. It said that a new record has been set.